Our story begins in the middle of chaos. The hunter Kim Jong-woo is surrounded by reporters, and they ask him what it feels like to become the first SS rank hunter in the world. He achieved this feat within a year, and now this dungeon is of extreme difficulty, which puts him in the spotlight for the other hunters. For Kim, it was the first time he had been sent on an operation in a long while. Even though he didn't say anything about it, reporters swarmed him at the dungeon's entrance, and this was an opportunity they couldn't afford to miss. So the protagonist apologizes to the reporters, but says he can't talk right now, as at the moment he just wants to focus on clearing the dungeon. From their reaction, it seems they were expecting that kind of answer, since it would be good for them to at least air Kim Jong-woo's voice on TV. The protagonist figures he might as well give them a gift today. Then right before entering the dungeon, he says there's one thing he's certain of. His team is always prioritizing the safety of civilians first, and that won't change no matter what happens. The reporters comment that, as expected from the number 1 ranked hunter, Kim Jong-woo is different. Controversial as he may be, he's still the best hunter. Kim says this should help leave a good impression on the public, until suddenly someone asks what he has to say about the assault incident involving the janitor. The protagonist turns around and sees who asked the question. That individual brings up the incident, where Kim allegedly assaulted a worker who was cleaning the dungeon, saying he heard that Kim threw the man against the wall. Kim immediately asks what he means by that. The man accuses Kim of playing dumb, but insists he has solid information, claiming he's a close friend of the person who was assaulted. Sarcastically, he says that the world's number 1 ranked hunter is really something, that he can beat up someone his father's age, not have a single article written about it. The other reporters are shocked to hear that, and realize this is a sensational story. Kim Jong-woo is also visibly surprised. Still, he proceeds with his mission and leaves the rest behind, talking to themselves outside. But the protagonist's anger is clear on his face, which makes his own team more tense. In the Republic of Korea, the Supernatural Dimension Management Association, let's just call it the Association, is an institution built to protect the country and its civilians from dungeons and the monsters that appear within them. The association gathered talented individuals with supernatural abilities and formed 4 teams among them. The operations team deals directly with the monsters. In other words, they are the hunters. Among these operations, team 1 is considered a light. Their dungeon success rate is 100%. Every member of the team holds a high rank in the country, and the team leader is Kim Jong-woo. However, the new rumor about him starts circulating on all news portals, and the protagonist becomes extremely irritated with it. His assistant asks what the problem is. Kim asks if she really doesn't know, and says he told her not to let that incident leak. She replies that she didn't leak anything. So Kim asks where this story came from because the internet is a mess. The protagonist asks where that reporter was from, and the assistant tells him he wasn't a reporter at all, just an ordinary citizen. Kim then asks how someone who's not even a reporter can cause such a stir. The assistant explains that the man is the son of the leader of the dungeon cleaning team, Park Genta, the one involved in the incident. This makes the protagonist even more furious, as he says the bigger problem is that this isn't the only incident he's been involved in. His assistant says that right now, several witnesses from other accidents are coming forward, and things are only going to get worse. So she recommends that Kim lay low for a while. The protagonist calls her Lee, a young, and says she knows very well that he doesn't like people getting in his way. He demands that she do something about it, because if this gets any worse, his reputation will be ruined. Miss Lee says she'll do her best. Kim says it's not like he's talking to a machine or anything, and asks what the association had to say. Lee explains that the head of the association still hasn't spoken out, since he's worried about other matters. But Kim says the leader hasn't said anything, simply because he has nothing to say. And even after all of Kim's achievements for the association, the leader probably still wants him out. And if that's the case, he won't just sit back and take it. His assistant doesn't react. So the protagonist says she behaves like a robot and always says the same things. In response, Lee says there won't be any issues, even if public opinion is a mess. His rank won't change, the protagonist says. That's obvious. A flashback shows that After clearing the dungeon and reading those articles, his anger boiled over his team member's pen and stopped him from going after the man who confronted him. Reluctantly, Kim got into the car headed for the association. Even though he calmed down a bit compared to before, his fury hadn't disappeared. He's a hunter who received an irresistible offer from the International Hunter Association. But years of achievements were suddenly rendered useless, which only fueled his anger even more. Back in the car, Miss Lee asks why Kim assaulted that man. He says the guy grabbed him first by the collar. Lee then asks why the man would do that. She knows Kim isn't too fond of the cleaning team, but this is the first time he's had a direct conflict with them. The protagonist says he doesn't quite remember what happened, but he adds that once they get to the association, he'll try to sort it out. He asks Miss Lee to bring him, the son of the man involved, because he wants to resolve this matter once and for all. Kim laments that this had to happen, and claims that everyone always tries to screw over those who are doing well. Then out of nowhere, he's startled because a truck appears right in front of their car, and due to a lapse in attention from the driver, they almost crash into each other. But before that can happen, the protagonist uses one of his abilities that allows him to exceed time. This way he manages to avoid the accident, and he thinks that if he had been just 1 second late, the asphalt would be painted with blood, since the truck didn't even try to stop. He even wonders if the truck driver was drunk. Lee, still in shock, doesn't even know what to say. The protagonist, already enraged by everything that happened, decides to get out of the car and confront the truck. But as soon as he steps out, several iron bars shoot toward him and trap him in a snare. Kim realizes it's a device meant to restrain people with supernatural powers, and he's left unable to move. Suddenly the truck that had stopped speeds toward him, trying to run him over. Protagonist, now restrained, can't use his abilities to escape. As a result, he's hit head-on and is left severely injured. However, another truck appears from the opposite direction, aiming to crush him completely, and it succeeds as both trucks slam into the protagonist at once. As if that weren't enough, a massive explosion follows, completely destroying both vehicles. Amid the flames, a silhouette can be seen. The still living protagonist mutters that this day just keeps getting worse, and asks who dares to challenge him. Soon several heavily armed soldiers appear and open fire on him. Kim realizes this was an unexpected trap. Carefully planned, an average hunter would have died, without even being able to fight back. But as someone who has faced monsters thousands of times, in dungeons that constantly put a hunter between life and death, the protagonist developed resilience against countless dangers. Therefore, his survival ability is far greater than others, and he says it won't be something like this that kills him. That's what he truly believed. But then a weapon with a blue glow called Titan, a weapon used in dungeons to restrain extremely dangerous monsters, was aimed right at his head. And the shooter didn't even hesitate to pull the trigger. The protagonist's system reports all the damage taken and calculates the probability of resurrection, but it ends up confirming his death. After that, Kim's body is thrown from the bridge, and as it falls into the water, his system alerts that due to his death, the requirement to obtain the secret ability has been fulfilled. This ability was called Karma, and due to this secret ability, the protagonist was sent 10 years back in time, and the system alerted that according to his karma, his life and job would be reset. Shortly after, a new job was assigned to him, exactly the one he hated the most: cleaning dungeons after battles. From being the #1 ranked hunter, Kim Jun-woo was reduced to a mere dungeon janitor, and now that he's experiencing it firsthand, he realizes how exhausting it is to work on the cleanup team. Everything that happened on the bridge was completely unexpected for Kim, because having a weapon pointed at his head like that is not something he's used to, until he suddenly wakes up in a panic and says, "That was one hell of a strange dream." Kim wonders how long he was asleep as his entire body feels stiff. But when he looks around, he wonders where he is. He sees that this room is a 26 square meter dump, worse than a pixie, and realizes it's not his home, since even his bathroom is bigger than this entire space. He then wonders if it could be Director Lee's house, but quickly deems it unlikely since she wouldn't let him in her house, even if the world were ending. So Kim asks himself again, where is he? That's when he checks his system and sees that his death was confirmed, and that he obtained the ability called Karma. This leaves him even more confused. Next, Kim looks at himself in the mirror and realizes he's 10 years younger, and that this is his 28-year-old face. He opens his system again and sees that he really did go back in time. With the system's explanation, the protagonist realizes this wasn't a dream. He really died and ended up going 10 years into the past. He can also seize that a new job was assigned to him, which he doesn't like since, after becoming a hunter at 18, he was promoted to a rank at 28, and at the time was ranked 22nd in Korea. If this were just a time regression, he would surely still be a hunter aiming to rise to the top. Under the spotlight, however, he's stunned by his new assignment, as he finds out he'll have to work as a dungeon cleaner. And the condition to cancel this is to become Secretary General. If he succeeds in canceling it, he'll return to the way things were before he died. But if he fails, he'll remain a janitor forever and rot. In this new life, Kim thinks about the International Supernatural Association, an organization that oversees and manages all the associations. Around the world, the Secretary General holds significantly more power than even the President of the United States. Even he, who was the world's first SSS rank, was never appointed to such a position, but now his system wants him to reach it within 5 years. Kim thinks it's impossible to achieve, and considers simply ignoring it all, since he doesn't care about this whole karma business. But then, he realizes that this is the only way to return to his former life. So it would be in his best interest to live as a hunter again. Like before, if he had his abilities, he wouldn't even break a sweat getting back there. But when he checks his system, he sees that all his previous skills are no longer available. With that, Kim realizes the situation is more serious than he thought. Then his system notifies him that he has obtained a new ability, which gets the protagonist a bit excited. But the system warns that the ability is a passive learning skill that gives the user an obsession with cleanliness. Upon reading this, Kim becomes furious and starts yelling alone inside the house. After thinking it through, he concludes that after dying, he woke up 10 years in the past, and went from being an SS rank hunter to a dungeon janitor. In the blink of an eye, on top of that, all his abilities were blocked, and all the achievements of his previous life vanished. Now Kim wonders what he should do, and whether he'll actually work in cleaning. However, he clings to his pride and the memories of his past life, since that's all he has left. More than that, he first needs to find out who were the men who killed him, because he's sure that wasn't a normal squad. Kim wonders if it was a private guild or someone from the association. If it wasn't either of those, he has no idea who it could be until suddenly his phone rings. An unknown number is calling and the protagonist decides to answer. On the other end, person says they're Park. The team leader Park asks if Kim is too busy to come in for work today. In turn, the protagonist thinks the name sounds familiar, but he can't quite remember. The leader continues saying, "It's been an hour since the report and Kim still hasn't shown up," but assumes he must be unwell or something, since the last dungeon was tough. The protagonist quickly realizes that Park is referring to the job, the system assigned to him. Mark admits the last dungeon was difficult, but promises that this one will be easier. One of the staff members says, "There are always people who quit after the first day," and he thinks, the leader shouldn't be begging someone like that to come back. On the other end, the protagonist ends up hearing the conversation, and thinks that no matter his current situation, he won't let anyone look down on him, not even mere dungeon cleaners. Park tells the others not to speak badly of Kim, as there might be a serious reason he didn't show up for work. Then he says Kim can rest today, but if something unexpected happens next time, he should call ahead of time to notify them. He also tells him to save the contact under the name Park Jun-tae. Upon hearing that name, the protagonist is shocked. Park says his name is hard to remember anyway, but the protagonist is stunned, because he's working for the very man he assaulted in his past life. Regardless, Park tells him to rest and says he'll see him next time. But the protagonist interrupts and says he's heading to work right now. Him is surprised that he doesn't have any decent clothes at home, and he's even more surprised when he steps outside and doesn't see a luxury car waiting for him. He even tried calling a taxi, but since he had no money, he had to take a bus, something he never imagined doing, which only fuels his anger. The protagonist realizes he's living a completely different life from before, and that means his relationship with the world has changed too. There's also the fact that he was violent with Park Genta, but that hasn't happened yet in this life. Kim has nothing to do with him yet, but if Park Genta was the one who killed him before, that changes everything. because there's definitely something strange about all this. Someone deliberately caused an accident and grabbed his attention. The fact they had an anti-supernatural device ready to block his powers and also had the Titan weapon. These details are too suspicious. That's a top-tier weapon. The technology behind it is substantial, not to mention its price. It's not something a dungeon janitor could easily acquire. He might have hired a professional to help. After all, his son seemed to hold a grudge against Kim as well. The protagonist believes that what he did wasn't nearly enough to justify the retaliation he suffered, and he blames Park Genta himself, claiming that he should have gotten out of his way. While Kim was still calm, a flashback shows what happened that day. Park Genta introduced himself as the chief of the dungeon cleanup team. Kim asked what he wanted. Park said he heard that Kim suggested reducing the number of janitors at the top level, and explained they were already struggling with staff shortages. So reducing the number of workers would make the job even harder. But Kim asked why he was being bothered with that. He claimed it was just a suggestion, and that he didn't have the authority to make such decisions. That was the responsibility of the regulation team, so Park should take it up with them. But Park argued that everyone knew how influential Kim was, and that his words carried more weight. That's why he begged him to take it back and reconsider the suggestion. At the time, the protagonist assumed his suggestion might reach the cleaners. Eventually, he just didn't expect they'd come after him personally to complain. Above all, just by looking into Park's eyes, it was obvious that continuing the conversation would only irritate both of them even more. So Kim said that lizards cut off their tails as a defense mechanism, claiming it's highly efficient, and asked Park why he thought that happens. Kim said it's how lizards survive. It doesn't matter if it's efficient or painful. They do it to save their lives. It's their last resort. Park tried to argue that the janitors aren't the problem. However, Kim said that's just what he thinks, because every human believes they're necessary in the world. But that's not true. He said the association was facing financial problems, so they were going to adjust the salaries of elite hunters. Then, Park asked if that's why everyone else also had their salaries cut. Kim argued that the association's top priority is protecting citizens from monsters, and that job is done by hunters. So if they're not paid, no one will do the work. So they had to use their last resort. Park said that was nonsense. There's a limit to how much someone like Kim can just do whatever he wants. He also said that hunters don't actually do that much, and besides they have no idea what the cleaning team does, or how important their work is. Kim then asked what more a janitor does besides cleaning. Besides, he claimed it wasn't up to him to decide how many people would be laid off. Furthermore, he said he should have made that suggestion years ago, but let it go because of his comrade, though now that no longer mattered. However, before leaving, Park asked if the association's priority really was protecting people, claiming that janitors are citizens too and also deserve to be helped. That deeply irritated Kim. He turned back and said he thought he'd already said enough, but apparently the janitor still didn't get it. He also said they should be thankful. They're not out there fighting and risking their lives, since they get paid to clean safely from the sidelines. That's why Kim claimed that thanks to the hunters' work, others get to fill their bellies and act like parasites on society. This time, it was Park who got angry, and that's why he grabbed Kim by the collar. But with just a shove, Kim pushed him away. Only he ended up using too much force, which caused Park to hit his head against the wall. So he decided to call Lee and ask her to handle it and bury the case. Back to the present, Kim has just arrived at the worksite, and he realizes he's standing before a yellow-level dungeon. He knows the boss of this dungeon is a foxtrot centipede, since he fought it back when he was 28. It's yet another confirmation that he really went back in time. Then he finally comes face to face with Park. Genta Kim looks at him with a dark stare, blaming Park for everything that happened. Meanwhile, the leader of the cleanup team has no idea what's going on, since for him it's just another normal workday. From Park Gent's perspective, he's just welcoming a new employee, but from the protagonist point of view, he's standing before the man responsible for his regression, and Kim sees him as an enemy. He notices that Park is a typical middle-aged man in his 50s, wearing a cheap uniform just like he remembered from the past. He quickly observes that Park doesn't look like the kind of man who would kill someone. After that, the protagonist meets the rest of the team, but one janitor named Han Sang-hyuk says Kim only came back because he got caught trying to ditch work. Another janitor, I'm Shuejeong, says that last time Kim said he couldn't do anything, and he really didn't. A girl named Mun So-yeon says 4 people are enough, and asks why the leader insisted on bringing another one. Huck calms them down and says they have a job to do, then asks how much time they have left. Huck says they've only got 45 minutes thanks to Kim showing up late. Then the leader says they can't waste any more time, and they need to get inside and finish before they get criticized again. Next he hands Kim the equipment he's supposed to use. The protagonist sees that along the protective suit there's a gas mask. Park asks if there's any problem. Kim says no, but in reality, he has no idea what a dungeon janitor actually does. Far from there. At the Supernatural Dimension Management Association of the Republic of Korea, the facility is managed by 4 main teams. The control team monitors dungeon spawn status and gathers information. The hunter support team produces and maintains weapons and items, while also supporting general field operations. There's also the operations team, a group of hunters who eliminate monsters in dungeons. And last but not least, the cleanup team, whose function was completely unknown to Kim, and he had to learn the janitor's role the hard way. On the way in, the leader says they need to go to the boss room, but when he sees Kim walking off alone, Park tells him it's dangerous. The protagonist recalls that Park himself said they should head to the boss room. Park confirms but says they should go together through the other side. However, the protagonist insists they're heading the wrong way, and points toward the actual boss room door. The others don't quite understand what Kim is saying. Even Mun So-yeon says that if he doesn't want to continue, he should just say so because they can't waste more time, and don't need someone slowing them down. Han Sang-hek tells them to ignore Kim and move on. Before leaving, he shows the protagonist the map given by the control team, and tells him to see the boss room with his own eyes. The protagonist knows that a clear dungeon is mapped by the hunters assigned to the operation, so the map is considered reliable among them. Even so, he claims the map is wrong and walks in the right direction. Kim thinks that he barely interacted with the control team before, and now realizes they don't do their job properly. Han Sang-hek gets extremely irritated with Kim, and the team leader asks how the protagonist can be so confident that he's heading the right way. Kim says it's not about confidence. He states he knows who is responsible for clearing the dungeon. Park doesn't quite understand what he means. But for the protagonist, it doesn't matter because he knows that even if he's telling the truth, they wouldn't believe him, so he changes the subject and just asks the rest of the team to move on. The leader is the only one who trusts the protagonist, since the others are constantly suspicious of him. As they walk, Kim asks why they only have 45 minutes. Park says that's the time limit before the dungeon closes. Kim had never heard of that before, since he only knew that all dungeons naturally disappear about 2 hours after being cleared. Hunters usually don't care, because they leave the dungeon right after finishing, and the clean-up team enters shortly after. He then asks if cleaning is really necessary. The dungeon is going to disappear anyway. Park replies that a clear dungeon doesn't disappear. It just goes dormant, and then monsters end up reappearing later. So if the dungeon reopens with bodies piled up, that would be a serious problem, because it makes it easier for hunters to get lost, and the natural gas released from decomposing monsters is extremely lethal to humans, and if there are bodies scattered around, it restricts the hunter's actions, directly affecting the completion of the dungeon. In other words, Park says, the janitor's job is to help the hunters focus on clearing the dungeon peacefully. He says he's proud of his work because without janitors, there would be no hunters. But in his mind, Kim thinks that's total nonsense. Park says that in addition to cleaning, they sometimes even rescue hunters, since they're also responsible for not leaving any information behind. Kim thinks he's never heard of a hunter being rescued by janitors, but he agrees that the clinging work isn't as useless as he thought. After walking a bit, they reach a gate, and Han Sang-huk says that according to the map, that's the boss room, but as soon as he tries to open the door, he finds an empty chamber and is left speechless for being wrong. The protagonist says he tried to warn them, which leaves Han Sang-hyuk even more confused. They ask the leader what they're going to do now. Park asks how much time is left before the limit. Han Sang-hyuk says there are 22 minutes remaining. Then the leader says that should be enough, and everyone agrees to keep going. Kim asks if they're being serious. The leader says yes, after all, their duty is to clean the dungeon while there's still time. Kim says it takes anywhere from a week to a year for a dungeon to reappear, so if they get trapped here, They won't survive, but that doesn't seem to scare the team leader. Kim says they must be insane, risking their lives just to do janitorial work. Park says it's always been that way and it always will be. Han Sang-huk says that if Kim wants to leave, he's free to do so. He never expected anything from him anyway. He also says this must be Kim's first time in a dungeon, and that for him cleaning means nothing. Even Mun So-yun looks at the protagonist with disdain, and he's left alone not knowing what to do. Meanwhile, Kim thinks that in 15 years as a hunter, he never failed a mission and as a result, reached number 1 in the global rankings. So he affirms no one can speak ill of his dungeon career. Being looked down on by janitors infuriates him. That's why he decides to show his knowledge and says, "There's a small passage to the boss room." Han Sang-hek says Kim is talking nonsense again, but the protagonist tells everyone to shut up and just listen. He states that the distance to the boss room is about 500 meters, but if they take the shortest route, it'll take only 8 minutes or even less. Then he tells the others to either follow him or leave. Soon the protagonist starts running, and the group follows him through the corridors, until shortly after they reached the location Kim claimed was the entrance to the boss room. The entire group is surprised, because they see with their own eyes that Kim was right all along, since in the room there lies the centipede's body. Looking at the condition of the room, Kim deduces that the battle was intense. Assuming it was a 20-member team, casualties must have been around 5 or 6 people, but they still managed to find the key point. The weakness of this enemy is the hollow spot on its forehead, just above the massive chin. Han Sang-hek says, they don't have much time and should get started right away. However, the protagonist stops him from proceeding, which leaves Han very confused. Then the centipede, which appeared to be dead, rises up and is about to attack the cleaning team. Everyone is frightened after all. The monster wasn't supposed to still be alive. Kim, on the other hand, can only think that this makes his job even harder. The protagonist has faced many dangers like this before, but this time he's without his abilities. Yet, to his surprise, instead of attacking, the centipede collapses dead once again. He realizes it was nothing more than a final breath, and blames the operations team for not checking properly. Amui Jang says this must be Kim's first time seeing a boss monster, so he tells him to step back. He says Kim froze up, but it's okay now and that he should leave the job to the others. The protagonist is deeply irritated at being underestimated, so he simply takes the knife from Im Huijang's hand and says, he'll do the job. Kim says that Im Huijang wouldn't be able to dismantle the centipede, claiming that if he tries to cut without knowing what to do, he'll end up breaking his wrist. He explains that the knife only fits into segments 3, 6 and 12 and doesn't go in anywhere else, so they shouldn't even waste time trying otherwise. Kim notices the monster's nerves are still reacting, but tells them to ignore it if the centipede twitches while being cut. The level of detailed knowledge Kim displays leaves the others speechless, until he asks if they're just going to stand there or help. Kim tells them all the details they need to know, but is also very strict about the procedure. Han Sang-hek assumes that Kim must know so much, because the leader gave him the control file. But Park says he's not responsible for that. Then Han Sang-hek says, there's no way someone would know that much without those files. But Park replies that this information isn't even in the files, and that's not where Kim got all that knowledge. So Han Sang-hek asks how he knows so much. The Park doesn't know how to answer. Meanwhile, Kim's passive skill for cleaning obsession activates. With that, the protagonist works intensely, and shortly after, with the team's help, he finishes dismantling the centipede. Then Kim feels strangely fulfilled, though he wonders why that is. Regardless, the leader praises the protagonist's performance, which makes Han Sang-hek fume with jealousy. Mun So-yun says that not only was he a big help, he practically did everything himself. But Kim thinks there's no need for all the fuss, since he just did his job. The leader says it's time to wrap up, since there are only 5 minutes left until closing, which is enough time to get out. So they begin heading to the exit, and Park says it went more smoothly than expected, thanks to Kim, until the protagonist notices one of the trash bags has ripped in. Blood has leaked onto his foot. Park asks if he really stepped on it after being told to be careful, but Kim says it's nothing and just asks everyone to step back. The protagonist knows this blood is sticky like glue, and even a seasoned hunter can get stuck if they're careless. However, the blood is weak against heat, so he believes he can easily melt it with his fire ability. But the moment he tries to use the skill, His system reminds him that all his former powers are currently locked, and Kim is left not knowing what to do. Park then tells the others to bring a rope. They'll try to pull Kim out, so they tie up the protagonist and everyone pulls together. Even so, Kim doesn't move an inch because the blood really stuck to his foot. They try to hurry, as there's less than a minute before the dungeon closes. When that fails, Park tells Kim to take off his clothes. But Mun So-yen reminds them that the gas level is extremely high, and that could be dangerous. Park, however, says that if Kim doesn't do it, they'll all be trapped. The protagonist wonders why. He said that since he's the only one stuck, and doesn't understand why everyone else would be trapped too. He thinks that even lizards cut off their own tails to survive. So in this situation they should abandon the cause. Then he wonders, are they less intelligent than lizards? Meanwhile, the leader says that this isn't working and tells everyone to leave, because those who can survive shouldn't die. His team doesn't want to abandon him. Park insists they leave, claiming that it's an order. They know there are only 10 seconds left, so they obey the leader and head toward the exit. Park goes to Kim and helps him take off his clothes. The two of them manage to move faster together. That way, the protagonist is able to break free and practically barefoot. He runs for the exit. The others get out first and wait anxiously for the leader to return, until there are only 3 seconds left. Park and Kim run for the exit, as if chasing the light at the end of the tunnel. And at the last second before the dungeon closes, the whole group, who had been holding their breath, sigh in relief as the two manage to escape in time. They're happy to see the team leader safe and sound, and Park is pleased with the support he has from his team. Meanwhile, Kim is shaken, realizing he nearly did in a dungeon without monsters. While cleaning, Park helps Kim up and says the gas level was lower than he expected, so they turned out fine. He also says that for a first time in a dungeon, Kim actually did pretty well. After that, he says this was just the first dungeon of the day, and they're only getting started. Kim, shocked, asks how many dungeons are left. Park answers that there are still 5 more. Immediately, the protagonist falls into despair. There are 8 operations teams just in the Seoul branch, and 96 teams across the country, including freelancers not tied to the association. There are about 11,000 registered hunters in Korea, but on the other hand, there are only 5 dungeon cleaning teams, total of 25 people. Each team has to clean around 3 to 4 dungeons a day, and if they're unlucky, they'll clean more than 5. And today is a day of bad luck for Kim and his group. After their shift, Park says that since it was an unlucky day, they should all have dinner together. And since the salary difference isn't that big, they should split the bill. So he asks if Kim is coming to dinner with them too, because it's better to decide now everyone's hungry. But the protagonist says he's not going, which surprises everyone. Kim thinks that he has to work with them, but he doesn't want to build any friendships. So Park says that if he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to. The protagonist feels a bit awkward, but ends up going home alone before that. Mun So-yeon compliments Kim's work and tells him to get home safely. Kim maintains his cold and calculating posture and walks away. Later, he thinks that it couldn't have been Park who killed him. In his past life, he doesn't seem cold-blooded enough to kill someone out of pure resentment. Setting him aside, the protagonist tries to think of someone who might want revenge against him. He remembers the rookie on his team who always cursed at him, his ex-girlfriend who nearly took her own life after their breakup, and a certain member of the control team. They were always at odds, so Kim wonders why so many people hated him. But he concludes that none of that matters now, because in this life, whoever killed him must be a complete stranger. In the end, if he wants revenge on whoever killed him, he needs to get rid of his current karma and return to his past life. To do that, he knows he must become the Secretary General of the International Association. So he thinks that if he still had his abilities, he would find a way to join the control team, until suddenly he gets an idea and opens his system window. Kim realizes he didn't check all the information that morning, and just now notices there's a condition for unlocking his abilities. In that case, there's no reason to keep working as a janitor. But when he looks at the conditions, he realizes they're all tied to cleaning work. This makes him furious, and he wonders if there's no other way to solve this. Kim crushes a bottle in frustration and says the system wants the cleaning team to be the air he breathes. As he looks around his room, he remembers the mess it's in, and unintentionally, he activates the passive ability of obsession with cleaning. As a result, he ends up cleaning the entire room, and doesn't even get a full night of rest, since all this focus is on cleaning. Without realizing it, He fulfills a condition that required a full day of work, which allows his hyper boost ability to be unlocked. The protagonist thinks, it's already been a week since he started taking a crowded and disgusting bus every morning and began cleaning dungeons. During this period he cleaned 25 dungeons. According to his calculations, he has already used 60 liters of bleach and dismantled 30 monsters. This ended up unlocking some of his old abilities. One of them is called Hyper Boost, which allows the user to move faster, but it's only useful when combined with offensive skills. Given that the condition only activates during combat, the ability can't even be used for training. Trying to stay positive, Kim concludes that it's better than nothing. Honestly, an annual minimum wage of 60 million won and being the #1 preferred profession are things that are impossible to reach. He thinks that dungeon janitor is the most extreme job of this era. However, there are also some relatively easy conditions, but they're a bit abstract. What's particularly easy is to increase the association's interest. Kim thinks that if he were still the former SS rank hunter, cooperating in dungeon clearing and providing information related to the next 10 years would skyrocket the association's interest all at once. But now that wouldn't be possible, since they wouldn't believe the word of a mere dungeon janitor. With that, the protagonist considers the possibility of contacting his old team and first trying to build a relationship of trust. However, he knows that there are more than 10,000 hunters in Korea, and it wouldn't be easy to find his former teammates. Unlike his past life, now the protagonist is just an ordinary citizen, and just like everyone else, he can't afford to get lost in thought. Otherwise he'll miss his bus stop just like he did. Now after a while he manages to arrive at the next dungeon site, but he sees only 2 of his team members and asks where the others are. Han Sang-hek says, they ran out of cleaning supplies and the boss went to buy more, while Hui Jiang took time off for personal reasons. The protagonist says they should have started work 10 minutes ago, and asks why Park only went to buy materials. Now with all the questions, Han Sang-hyuk asks why Kim arrived late. He replies that he missed the bus stop. Han Sang-hyuk starts laughing, but says he brought coffee and they should drink. While waiting for the boss to return, Kim begins to notice that Han Sang-hyuk's attitude is almost angelic compared to their first day on the job. The fact that he hasn't given up yet is beyond Kim's own expectations. After that, he suggests they go into the dungeon already, but Han Sang-hyuk says the hunters haven't finished yet. When the protagonist approaches the entrance, he realizes this isn't a dungeon he cleared in his past life, but he recognizes it as at most a mid-tier blue-grade dungeon. So it's not the kind of dungeon where people usually exceed the time limit, and he wonders why the hunters are having trouble inside. He thinks it's not like he can go in to help, so he figures he just has to wait. But it doesn't take long for him to realize that thinking like that was a mistake, because 30 minutes go by and they still haven't finished, which makes the protagonist furious. In the middle of this fit of rage, the hunters start coming out. Ken notices they're all ranked E and this is just a blue dungeon. They're coming out completely worn down, so he says they're not worth the salary they earn. But his colleague tells Kim to keep it down, because they might overhear. However, something catches the protagonist's attention. He sees a familiar face coming out of the dungeon. The face of this woman is unmistakable. Long black hair, flawless features like those of an actress. It's definitely Kim Min-ju. She used to be a direct subordinate on the protagonist's team, but he wonders why she's there. Min-ju notices one of the janitors staring at her, so she walks over and asks if he has some kind of problem with her. Protagonist says no, but in his thoughts he wonders why he had to run into her right here. He had been thinking about reaching out to his old team, but now he thinks Min-ju will have to be an exception, because in his past life she hated him for no justifiable reason. When she suggested that there was no choice but for her to retire because of an injury, Min-ju offended Kim countless times. She didn't even realize that Kim was saying it for her own good. Her pride was too high even though her skills weren't bad. Mun So-yun interrupts his thoughts and asks if Kim knows that hunter, since he was staring at her. Kim replies that he doesn't. He just thought she looked like someone he knows. So Yen understands, but says his expression toward the hunter looked rather threatening. She immediately thought it might be an ex-girlfriend. Annoyed, the protagonist asks what she's talking about, but Mun So-yen says it was just a joke. In the middle of all that, Park arrives and asks what happened, for the mood to turn so tense. Protagonist says it's nothing, but Han Sang cut counters saying that Kim just ran into his ex. Super irritated, The protagonist simply says they should just get back to work now. In a blue-gray dungeon on civil terrain. It lives up to its name as it's a dungeon created from buildings. Han Sang-hek asks if Kim studied this dungeon beforehand. He says no and only knows that the boss is a humanoid monster. Over the past few weeks he was bombarded with questions because of his vast knowledge about dungeons, and the protagonists dodge all of them. The boss says this dungeon looks like civil terrain, and the monster remains aren't very noticeable, so it's better to make sure to clean every corner and crevice thoroughly, especially the blood that tends to gather under the stairs. He says they must pay extra attention to that. Park leaves the others near the entrance and tells the protagonist to follow him to the boss room. They walk a bit through the dungeon until the boss sees a body and says he really doesn't like humanoids, since they look like human corpses and that's grotesque. Kim sees that up ahead there's a corpse of a monster called Vega 1 that appears to be a woman about 1.70 meters tall. Park says they can take her out without dismembering, especially since doing that is uncomfortable. Then he looks at Kim and asks why he's spacing out. The protagonist notices something strange, but says it's nothing. He remembers that Vega isn't particularly dangerous, and as long as one is aware of her quick movements, she's not hard to defeat, but he wonders if Minju had trouble. He knows that around this time she should be ranked B, and while not the strongest, B rankers are still quite powerful. If it weren't for the fact that Minju got hurt in his past life, she would have had the potential to reach S rank. Her sword skills in particular were even better than the protagonist at that time. Even if their relationship wasn't good, he knows how to acknowledge that, and he thinks the Minju he knew would never have had trouble with a blue-grade boss. However, the protagonist believes they have nothing to do with each other now, and he even imagines he'll never see her again, until he sees some sword scars on the body and gets a strange feeling. Soon a major question hangs in his mind. After a long day of work at 5 in the morning the next day, the cleanup crew is called again. Kim thinks they've been unlucky 3 days in a row, and only managed to sleep 2 hours before being summoned again. He thinks that even when he was a hunter, he never had such a tight schedule. And to make matters worse, the hunters hadn't even exited the dungeon yet. The whole group complains about this, but the boss says that as long as the hunters don't leave, they can't do anything but wait. It's already been an hour past the set time, so everyone is irritated. Then the protagonist looks at Mun So-yun and says, she looks really tired. So-yun says she's fine and claims she's always been full of energy. Either way, Kim tells her to take it easy, because he can see the exhaustion on her face. Then the hunters start to exit, and in the middle of them, Kim Minju appears. The protagonist didn't expect to see her again. He thinks there are so many dungeons and so many hunters, so why do they keep running into each other? Then the two of them stare at each other. The protagonist notices this and tries to play it off. Not just him, but Minju also seems bothered. She then tells Kim not to get in her way. Protagonist immediately calls her a rude brat, but as he watches Minju walk away, he remembers the corpse from earlier, and he wonders if he should tell Minju. Kim hesitates because he doesn't want to care about this. Just thinking about his past makes his blood boil. Flashback shows that in the past, Kim visited her in the hospital right when Kim and Ju got injured. When he arrived, Kim thought that as her superior, she should stand up to greet him, but still asked how her recovery was going. Minju said she wasn't too sure and that she had just undergone surgery. Kim immediately asked how someone who uses a sword could ignore a muscle inflammation and let it deteriorate. He also said she should have developed better use of her left hand, and claimed that blindly relying on one arm is what destroyed her shoulder. In turn, Minju asked why he didn't say that earlier. The protagonist quickly said she was only saying that because she regretted letting things reach that point, and claimed that in that condition, she could no longer be a hunter. He handed her a resignation letter to sign, stating that the association's opinion was unanimous. Ken said that if she pushed herself, even a normal routine would become difficult. Therefore, her days as a hunter were over. Minju said it was nothing, and argued that her leader knew very well why she wanted to be a hunter. The protagonist said that in her current condition, Minju would only be a burden to the team. Besides, the decision had already been made and she just needed to comply. He also said that she should have informed them that she was in pain. By keeping quiet, the problem had become far worse. Annoyed, Minju said she had warned them multiple times, and when she said she would request a full checkup from the support team. Kim told her that everyone was in pain, and that she should stop complaining and get back to work. She then claimed that the reason she kept pushing through the pain was exactly because of her leader, the same one now forcing her to retire. However, the protagonist snapped and said that wasn't his fault, claiming she should have taken better care of her own body and sought medical help, not gone back to work just because someone told her to. Either way, Minju said she'd be able to return to work after a few days of physiotherapy. Ken said he couldn't wait, and that a swordswoman with a damaged shoulder was useless. He said a parasite like that belonged in the cleanup team. After hearing that, Minju asked if her leader had ever seen her as a companion, because now she believed she had only ever been a tool to him, one that was being tossed away. Now that she was no longer useful, the protagonist said he never liked her anyway, and that as a superior, she should show more respect. After all, he was never lenient with anyone. Minju said she never liked Kim either, precisely because he treated everyone with contempt. In turn, Kim said he no longer cared where she went or what she said, just didn't want her on his team anymore. Provoked to her limit, Minju slapped him, telling Kim to be born as a better person in his next life. Back in the present, Kim reflects on this and realizes he really was a jerk back then, and doesn't even remember if she actually complained about the pain before the surgery. Knowing himself, Kim figures he probably thought Minju was faking illness to avoid work, which is why he ignored her complaints. He concludes that, if not for the injury, she would have become a great hunter. But now he notices that Minju apparently is already in pain again, and thinks that maybe there's still time for her to get proper treatment. However, he doesn't want to get involved in it. But his conscience weighs on him and he decides to back. So he calls out to Minju and tells her to increase the grip strength in her left hand. But to Minju that sounded really weird, and she doesn't understand what Kim meant. The protagonist continues claiming that when she holds the sword, she only applies strength with her right hand, which puts a lot of pressure on her shoulder. Even if she can attack quickly the way she's doing now, her right shoulder will be overloaded soon. That's why she should use her left hand for support and reduce the weight on her body. Most importantly, once she finds balance between both hands, she'll become even stronger. Minju listens to all of this and doesn't even know how to respond. It's a very unusual situation, and she wonders what a cleaner could possibly know about combat. Either way, Kim walks into the dungeon and says that she's a smart hunter and will know what to do. He advises her to ask the support team for an examination. The next day, Minju decides to go see a doctor, and after being examined, the doctor says the problem could have been much more serious if it hadn't been addressed in time. That surprised her a lot, since Minju didn't really believe the words of that stranger. The doctor says her shoulder is inflamed. It's nothing too serious, but if it had been neglected, could have turned into a major issue. He says he'll prescribe some medicine, but insists that correcting her posture is the most important thing. With that, Minju remembers that the janitor said the exact same thing, and she's left wondering how he knew that. Back with the cleaning team, they finish another day of hard work, until Han Sang-hyuk calls out to Kim. The protagonist says he's tired and not in the mood for idle talk, but Han Sang-hyuk asks how he could make his ex-girlfriend wait for him to finish working. This late, Minju had gone to the dungeon to speak with him, but Kim takes a while to process it and wonders what she's doing there. Kim asks why Minju is there at this hour. His group is quite surprised. The boss says to give them some space and walks away with the others, leaving Han Sang-hyuk jealous. The protagonist then asks what Minju wants, saying he needs to hurry and catch the last bus without saying a word. Minju simply points her sword at him. Then she asks how he knew about her injury. Kim senses the danger and tries to think of an answer that won't get him killed. Minju demands a reply and tells the janitor not to pretend he doesn't know what she's talking about. Then the protagonist realizes she actually went to get a medical exam, but tries to dodge the situation, claiming he just figured she was having issues, and that he only wanted to give her some tips, based on things he'd seen on the internet. Not buying it, Minju says her technique is kept strictly confidential, and isn't anywhere online. Yet the janitor seemed to know it in detail. So how Kim realizes he said too much and now seems suspicious. He knows that Minju's technique is indeed special and not widely known. It's not something a mere dungeon cleaner would be familiar with, and if this continues, he'll be reported to the Association for Suspected Espionage. So he says he saw sword marks on the monster's corpse among the many scars. Something stood out. The injuries looked like they were made by someone who applies force with their right hand. But the follow-through techniques were shallow. He quickly realized that the wounds were made by a swordswoman with little strength in her left hand. Vega is fast but not strong, so she doesn't pose a big threat. A known method to deal with her is to take advantage of her speed, but there were no signs that this had been done, and there's no way someone skilled wouldn't know that. So Kim concluded that Minju's body couldn't keep up or respond to Vega's speed, which is why he said all those things. Minju is quite impressed. She says her shoulder actually did feel a bit tense after the fight. Kim says those symptoms normally wouldn't mean much, but he suspects Minju feels them whenever she needs to move her body quickly, especially as a swordswoman. The reason Kim can give such advice, despite not being a swordsman himself, is that during his time as a hunter, he was the world's first SS at rank. But to Minju, the reason he knows so much is because Kim is a freelance hunter. On the side, she's heard there are some like that in Seoul. She also says those hunters top the Korean rankings, but never reveal themselves unless clearing high-risk dungeons. However, the protagonist denies being a hunter, and Minju then asks what he really is. He says you can tell just by looking. He's a simple janitor. He also says he has to work tomorrow, and now he's heading home to rest. Kim thinks that was a very transparent question, and if Minju were a smart hunter, she would try to use it to get something out of him. Now he's just a simple dungeon cleaner. He doubts they'll meet again. Before leaving, she thanks him, and that surprises the protagonist. He wonders if Minju is really grateful for something. A little embarrassed, Minju repeats her thanks and takes the opportunity to invite Kim to something. Sometime later, she goes to the association to request a break and says even the support team thinks it would be good for her to get some rest. The captain asks if this is because of the test results she received. Minju replies yes. He is Lee Soo, young captain of the operations team, and says he never even considered it a possibility. Minju argues that she intends to improve her skills during the break, but she doesn't convince the captain, and he asks if she's planning to travel with a boyfriend or something like that. Minju insists she's not. She says she needs to learn some sword skills before returning to work. Lee asks if she's going to some academy. Minju says no, she's going to take private lessons. Her captain asks if she knows a master who offers private lessons. Minju says yes, a janitor she recently met. The captain asks if there's no one better to teach her, and says a simple janitor wouldn't be capable of that, claiming it would be better for her to go to Kendo Academy. In response, Minju says she'll figure it out on her own. Then the captain asks if it was the janitor who told her to get the medical exam. She immediately wonders how the captain guessed that. She then remembers the nurse who treated her, and thinks maybe she was the one who spilled it. However, her captain says that a mere janitor is not qualified to teach a professional hunter. But Minju says the janitor hasn't agreed yet, because the last time they talked, he rejected the proposal. Lee then asks what she intends to do. Minju says she's going to keep insisting until the janitor agrees to train her. Annoyed, the captain tells her to do whatever she wants, but warns her that a major dungeon will be cleared in a few weeks, and she must return before then. With that, Minju thanks and leaves. After that, the captain says the organization is going backwards, and wonders what a hunter could possibly learn from a janitor. He also thinks the other teams mustn't hear about this, because he fears becoming a laughingstock, especially by the captain of Team 2. Lee starts to suspect that the cleaning team may have something to do with it. Just imagining it makes his stomach turn. He then makes a call, asking if the executive director of management is available, because he has something to discuss with him. A few days later, a new dungeon opens and the protagonist is inside cleaning. Surprisingly, he's in a good mood, which his team finds strange. Kim is like this because one of his skills was unlocked. He's not sure why, but he thinks it's a great thing. Park approaches and says he's not interested in meddling in an employee's life, but asks why that girl came with him. The protagonist thinks to himself that it wasn't his idea. Still, he uses the excuse that they were short one person on the team, so he needed help. Ark understands, but says she's a hunter, and if the association finds out about it, there could be trouble. The protagonist knows that, but says she showed up against his will, just like she told her. Captain Minju went to Kim and begged him to train her. At the time, Kim was extremely shocked. wondering what kind of hunter asks a janitor for help. And now he's trying to figure out how to get rid of her, in an attempt to make her give up. Kim said he'd consider it if Minju helped with the cleaning, thinking she would never accept. But to his surprise, Minju said that if that was the condition, then she agreed to help with the cleaning. Kim had underestimated her. He thought someone with such a huge ego would never do that, but he realizes now he was wrong in his judgment, and now he has to put up with Minju. However, from So Yun's point of view, she doesn't like seeing Kim force his ex to do this, because she bought into the idea that they used to date, and because of that, she feels a bit jealous seeing Kim so close to his ex-girlfriend, especially since he brought her to work with him. So the atmosphere between them becomes rather unpleasant. Not long after, Kim is on the verge of going crazy. He never imagined that Minju would follow him everywhere. She calls him teacher and says the blood isn't coming off the floor. Kim, however, tells her not to call him that. He also says not to clean using just brute force, and explains that there's a difference between monster blood and human blood. They shouldn't be mixed first. She should wipe the human blood with a cloth, and then dissolve the rest with fire. Never try to clean both at the same time. Besides that, he says there are always fangs and meat mixed in with the blood, so she has to use a knife to scrape it, and gather all the monster remains in one place. Kim also says that after using the knife, it must always be cleaned because monster blood corrodes the blade. Minju makes a confused face as she tries to absorb so much information. Seeing that the protagonist thinks she's about to give up and asks if she's okay. She says she was just thinking that cleaning is actually pretty deep, and states that Kim is definitely not a normal person. Observing this, the team leader says that Kim Jong-woo is now a complete cleaner, and there's nothing he can't teach. This leaves Kim a bit embarrassed. Then the protagonist thinks that this isn't normal at all, and wonders what's so great about this situation that's making him stand there smiling, especially considering he used to be an SS rank hunter, and now he's questioning the fact that he's proud of having become a complete cleaner. While he gets lost in thought, the team leader also praises the rookie's work, but the one who doesn't like this situation is none other than Mun. So Yun. A little while later, Minju says she's finished cleaning and asks what she should do next. So Yun takes the chance to go with her somewhere else, and asks the team leader if that's okay. Park says there are a lot of corpses in the other direction, and asks if they can handle it. So Een says yes. She really wants to take the opportunity to work beside a hunter, and she says she'll be back soon. Seeing the two of them leave, Han Sang-hyuk says that in a fight he bet on the hunter. The protagonist can't disagree with him. On the other side of the dungeon, So Yen doesn't know what to do. She brought her colleague there on impulse, but now she doesn't even know what to say. And she doesn't even know why she did it until Minju asks if she's okay. Since she looks pretty tired, she says she is, but just by looking into her eyes, Minju knows that's not true. Then So Yun says she hasn't been sleeping well the past few days, and Minju asks if something's been keeping her up. So Yun hesitates to answer. She says she'd rather talk about something else, and honestly, admits that it's the first time she's ever talked to a hunter. Minju says there's nothing interesting to tell, except that she followed in her father's footsteps, and became a hunter then. So Yun asks if she works with her father. But Minju says no, he injured his shoulder and was fired. Her father's superior said he was faking illness to skip work, and the people he worked with made him walk on eggshells. So her father endured the pain and work, out of fear of becoming a burden to others, which only worsened his injury. So Een says, it's unbelievable that colleagues would do something like that. But Minju says there are no colleagues in the association, only people of higher or lower rank. She says her father was a B-rank hunter until he was fired, but no one cared about him after he lost his job. He was seen only as a disposable tool. Minju says the entire association is like that place where hierarchy is everything, where people act extremely tough with the weak, and extremely weak with the strong. The same happens with the hunter she works with. But Minju says the clean team isn't like that. Then she decides to change the subject, since the mood got a little heavy, and asks if So Yun is interested in her teacher. So Yen gets embarrassed and asks if it's that obvious. Minju says yes. Anyone would notice, still embarrassed. So Yen says that Kim is good at his job, and has a strong sense of responsibility. He didn't show up on the first day and she thought Kim was a dropout. But when he finally came, He surprised her with his effort and knowledge about cleaning, because he knows dungeons and monsters like no one else, and the information he provides is extremely useful and accurate, even better than what the control team has. With that, Minju thinks that Kim is definitely not a normal guy. His knowledge proves it, and that alone is more than enough reason to keep him in her sights. She says she's not interested in Kim in that way, so So-yeon asks why she keeps following him around all day. Minju says, as she mentioned, the association standards are extremely strict, and she's not meeting them at the moment. That's why she needs to become stronger, and to do that, she needs Kim's help. That makes So-yeon realize she had misunderstood the whole situation. She asks if that means Minju isn't Kim's ex-girlfriend. Sometime later they decide to return. Seeing the behavior between the two of them, the protagonist asks since when they've gotten so close. Park in turn says that the boss here is a poisonous monster, and warns everyone to be careful, because if the poison comes into contact with the skin, it'll be dangerous, but overall they shouldn't worry too much. He calls So-yeon's attention and says she's slower than usual, asking if everything is alright. She replies that her uniform is a bit uncomfortable, and the mask is making it hard to breathe, but insists it won't affect her work. Han Sang-hek asks if it's not time to replace the equipment, and suggests the boss request a budget increase from the association. Park understands how important safety at work is. He says he already tried to do that, but the association claims it doesn't have money for it. Either way, he tells them to use what they got for now, and to go ahead and enter the boss room. As soon as they open the door, they find a pile of bodies, and among them the main one. The boss's corpse. Park reminds everyone not to expose their skin. The protagonist knows that a giant slime looks harmless, but if you're exposed to its poison for too long, you'll be contaminated. The time limit is only 5 minutes. If you're poisoned in this dungeon, there's no hope, and you need double the daily caution. Anyway, they begin working, and the team leader monitors everything. He notices that So-yeon is standing still. When he gets close to the girl, she collapses on the floor unconscious. This obviously worries the entire group. Everyone is startled. Then the leader realizes So-yeon is passed out and she doesn't look good at all. Kim says her mask might be broken, and the leader says they need to get her out of there and call the support team. The protagonist thinks he should have warned her to be more careful before it came to this. Now he feels it's too late, since there's no way the support team can get there within 5 minutes to apply the antidote when poisoned. The person feels excruciating pain throughout the body, and eventually the worst happens. Han Sang-hek tells Kim not to just stand there because they need help. Kim in turn tells Minju to grab his sword. She hesitates, not understanding what he's going to do. The others tell Kim to move and go get help quickly, but he says there's no time. He just needs Minju to get the sword and says the cut will be quick. Minju says it doesn't matter what he says. She's not going to cut So-yeon. She insists there must be another way to help her, but the protagonist says he's not asking her to cut So-yeon, but to cut him. The team leader panics, not knowing what Kim is trying to do, but Kim focuses on talking only to Minju, trying to convince her. Eventually, Minju agrees to equip the sword. She says she doesn't know what he's doing, but she performs the summoning anyway. At that very moment he sees that Minju is using a skill, tells her he didn't order that. He just wanted a regular cut. But right after Minju slashes him, Kim feels intense pain from the blow, and his system detects that he has been attacked. That's exactly what he wanted, because now he can enter combat mode and access some skills that were previously locked. The protagonist says he'll run ahead, carrying So-yeon to the support team, and will meet the others there. Park doesn't understand any of what's happening and says, now there are 2 injured people, so it'll take too long to carry them both out. Like a flash of light, the protagonist picks up the girl and rushes off, leaving the others stunned by his speed. The hyper boost ability has been activated, but since it can only be activated in combat, the protagonist thought quickly and asked Minju to strike him. In any case, he needs to hurry. He has only 3 minutes. Sometime later, after he manages to reach the hospital, Park and the rest of the team arrive too, and he thanks them for the treatment So-yeon received. The doctor says it was very dangerous. They were lucky and got there in time. He says So-yeon can already receive visitors and asks who brought her in. The protagonist introduces himself as Kim Jun-woo. Then the doctor says that before leaving, he has to stop by the hospital reception to pay the bill, which irritates Kim since the girl only needed a few stitches. After that, they go to her room, Park says she really worried them, and that she should have warned someone that something was wrong. Han Sang-hek comments that for the equipment not to be working, it must have been really worn out. He also says that not replacing protective gear for over a year is dangerous, but the association only cares about hunters, not cleaners. The boss calls him out, but Han claims he didn't say anything untrue. Then he realizes what he just said, and adds that the fault isn't with the hunters. With the association, Minju says she wasn't offended. Either way, Park tells So-yeon to use this opportunity to rest. He also says not to worry, as he'll personally handle the work accident report. Seeing Kim walk out, So-yeon asks where he's going. Protagonist replies that he's just getting some fresh air. Kim becomes thoughtful about the whole situation, since a teammate suffered a work accident due to old equipment. But that's not what's really on his mind. He remembers that one of his skills requires a condition to be unlocked, which specifically involves getting a budget increase for the cleaning team, and he concludes that this is the perfect time to suggest, because if he uses this accident to pressure the association, they'll have no choice but to offer support to protect their own image. Back to So-yeon. She says Kim didn't seem okay and asks if something happened to him. Park says he's probably angry about everything that happened right away. So-yeon blames herself for it, but her boss reassures her, saying it's not her fault and mentions that Kim got hurt. Even if he seems hot-headed, he believes Kim cares a lot about his teammates, and that's why he needs a moment to cool off. Minju thinks that Kim takes care of his teammates, to the point of sacrificing his own body, and concludes she has a lot to learn from him. Meanwhile, Han Sang-hek finds Kim more and more suspicious. He says Kim saved So-yeon using a skill, and that's not something a regular janitor would know how to do, since she was unconscious. So-yeon didn't see any of that and says that because she didn't know. She never got a chance to thank him since that came up. Park asks what Minju thinks of Kim. She doesn't know for sure. She just thinks he's a good person and that he has a nice face. But Park says that's not what he was asking. He wants her opinion from a hunter's perspective. Minju then feels embarrassed, realizing she said too much. Park says it's a waste for Kim to be a janitor, since he knows so much about dungeons and even has attack techniques, and he asks if Kim might be fit to transfer to the operations team. Minju says that Kim is definitely ahead of most hunters, in terms of experience and knowledge. But the problem is that he's in the cleaning team. Han Sang-hek gets irritated and asks if someone from the cleaning team can't move up in life. Minju says it's actually the opposite, which confuses him even more. She explains that even though she's a B-rank hunter, she can't gauge Kim's power level, and yet he chose to be on the cleaning team on his own. Park asks if she's suggesting that Kim picked this job on purpose, instead of being somewhere higher. Minju says yes, and she can't think of any other reason. Park just can't understand why anyone would do that. Then Minju says she has only a hunch, but she believes her teacher has incredible skills. He just doesn't want to get involved in the association or hunter hierarchy, because he prefers the camaraderie of the cleaning team. Such a statement leaves everyone in disbelief, and they actually start to believe it. Then the team leader says that if that's Kim's will, he won't mention a department transfer again. Han Sang-hek says that if Kim cares that much about his teammates, maybe he went straight to the association to complain about the accident. Thinking about it, Minju concludes that's very possible. Speaking of him, the protagonist did exactly that. He went directly to speak with Shu Min-shil, the director of the Seoul branch of the Supernatural Dimension Management Association. The top boss asks who he is, and Kim says he's just a janitor who has something to say. Standing before the director, the protagonist requests a budget increased for the cleaning team. Sayu and Cheol is surprised by such a request. The protagonist knows that this director is the top figure in the Seoul branch, and around this time, Shu Min-chiu's group had grown one by one through connections, and his influence in the association was immense. In turn, Si Menchel says that Kim should go to the administration department to make such a request. Kim says that a good hunter doesn't go after monsters one by one, but heads straight for the boss. Right away, Shu Min-chil asks if he's a hunter, but Kim replies that he's not. He's just a janitor. Shu Min-chil says that not even the leader of the cleaning team came to him to ask for a budget increase, but now a mere employee took such an initiative. The director says that since Kim is new, he still doesn't know how to respect his elders, and that's why he acted that way. In any case, he asks what Ken would do if he got the raise. Ken says he's asking for an increase, because the budget doesn't even cover the costs, which aren't even that high. Shu Min-chiu says that Kim has guts, and he had been ignoring him until now. But his boldness is hard to ignore. But cutting to the chase, Kim says there was an accident, and even though the equipment was really old, there was no money to buy a new one, so they kept working anyway, until someone on the team got hurt due to the worn-out gear, and had to be hospitalized. The director says he hasn't received any report about that. Kim replies that it just happened. Protagonist's confidence catches the director's attention, and he wonders why this kid in front of him is being so rude and disrespectful. Kim continued to say he understands that the director is trying to profit off the cleaning team, but says he shouldn't let accidents like that happen. Seo Min-chul regrets what happened, but says the headquarters has no money, and that Kim probably doesn't know the situation, because he hasn't worked there that long. The protagonist disagrees with that claim. He adds that the director must have taken a big chunk of the budget this year, because the budget for the supernatural subjugation department must have been quite high, and 70% of that went to the operations team. So, he states that the director won't be able to use it all within a year, so whatever's left will end up spent on pointless stuff. And in this case, Kim is just asking him to share a bit with those who really need it. Extremely surprised by such claims, the director once again asks who the protagonist really is. Kim stands firm and says he's just a simple janitor, and as a director he says, Seo Min-chul should be thinking about his position as well, because he probably worked hard to get where he is, and should at least try to hold that position for a good while. He also says that the cleaning team is already known for being mistreated, and it would be even worse if people found out about the accident and the circumstances around it. Seo Min-chul asks if he's being threatened. Kim says no, that he's just being realistic. Then the director says he understands the situation, and asks how much of an increase Kim wants. Kim says he'll leave that up to the director. He thinks that his system set a condition for an increase, but didn't require a specific amount. So as long as the budget goes up, he benefits before leaving. The director questions him, asking if he knows a hunter named Kim Min-ju. Kim asks why he wants to know. With that, the director realizes that Kim must be the janitor she mentioned earlier, so he just says he'll review the budget increase and get in touch soon. The fact that the director mentioned Minju's name leaves the protagonist a bit confused, but either way he leaves. Meanwhile, the director thinks that Kim is not just a simple janitor, like he claimed. He calls Soo Young Min-ju's superior, and says he just spoke with the janitor she mentioned earlier, but claims that he's not just a janitor, because judging by how much he knows, he's probably connected to the association in some way. He also says the janitor proposed a budget increase for the cleaning team, but he suspects that's not his real goal. Upon hearing this, Soo-young says he was actually thinking about teaching that janitor a lesson, because he claims he needs to learn to bow down before his superiors. The next day after the incident, Chief Park receives a letter and sees that it's a disciplinary action. He says that instead of compensation, the association wants to punish them, and asks the hunter if that makes any sense. She says no, and she's surprised too. The letter claims that the reason for the disciplinary action is that Mun So-yun broke a rule by having multiple jobs, and they accuse fatigue of being the cause of the accident. Ark and the others are shocked by this, not to mention that the compensation request was denied, because the association itself claimed that the accident was caused by personal negligence, and there was no evidence that the equipment was unfit for use. The protagonist hears all of this and wonders, is this really how Shu Min-chul is going to handle things? Mon So-yun tries to calm the team down and says everything's okay. She says that the disciplinary action is just a warning, and she never expected to be compensated anyway. Kim, however, can only think about himself, since the issue is that his ability won't be unlocked because the budget wasn't increased. Han Sang-hyuk in turn says that he sees Kim differently now, and the protagonist asks what he means. Han says he heard Kim took a bullet for the cleaning team, and even went to meet with the director, even if he didn't get the result he wanted. That was seen positively by everyone in the group, but that's not what the protagonist wanted, since being seen as a good guy is not part of his plan. Either way, the boss tells them to get started on another workday, and warns everyone not to overdo it, especially So-yun. Meanwhile, Kim thinks that he didn't ask for much, and didn't even sue the association, But pointing out someone's multiple jobs as a problem was a low blow. He wondered if there's another reason why the higher UPS are being so extreme. And right then, Minju suggests it might be her fault. The protagonist asks what she's talking about. She says that the last time she spoke with her captain, she ended up mentioning the cleaning team. She then assumes he must have taken it the wrong way and is trying to teach them a lesson because of it. Kim asks what the captain's name is. She says it's Lee Soo-young, the first captain of the control team, and asks if Kim knows him. The protagonist knows him well. He knows that Lee Soo-young is a representative figure of Min Chul's faction and became a captain through connections, precisely because he has no talent. So it's no surprise that he did this. Next, Kim tells his boss that he's taking the rest of the day off, shortly after at Samsung Station in Seoul. While some people walk around calmly, a commotion breaks out in the middle of the city because a new dungeon has appeared, and they need to report it to the association immediately. But in the face of that, the protagonist says, "It's been a while," and wonders if he should show off a little of his skills. Inside the dungeon, a huge orc gets ready to attack. Not just him, others surround the protagonist as well, until he activates one of his abilities, which boosts the user's speed in combat, the infamous hyper boost, and with it, he attacks easily, taking down the orcs around him and pulling off a dungeon interception. That is, secretly clearing a dungeon without the association's permission, something freelance hunters often do. It's been a while since Kim last fought, so he ends up not being able to control his strength. Normally a hunter would have to clear the dungeon with little intel, which leads to a high mortality rate and few even attempt it. But that doesn't matter to him, because Kim only thinks about finishing fast. Before the operations team arrives, a simple dungeon would take under 10 minutes, but that was before his return. Now, without his defensive skills, even a single hit could kill Kim. However, the reason he can still clear a dungeon with ease is because he's been in it before. The protagonist stands before the boss and uses his speed to close the distance. He knows exactly how to defeat it. After all, he's done it in his previous life. He then throws a shovel at the enemy's weak spot, which allows the damage to be greatly increased. After taking a direct hit, the enemy, some kind of robot, ends up exploding with that. The protagonist clears his fourth dungeon in just one day. An operations team hunter usually clears 3 to 4 dungeons per week, but because these are low-level dungeons, the profit is smaller. Kim then notices that there are lots of association cars near the dungeon. Exit seemingly due to an emergency at headquarters. After all, they lost out on 4 dungeons worth of revenue in a single day, and have no idea why, since freelancers don't work for the association and take away their earnings. Kim knows that if he gets caught, he'll be fired, but if he's lucky, he might just get away with paying a fine. Either way, he figures they don't even suspect that he's a janitor. He then decides to call it a day, just imagining the hunters' faces when they find out the dungeons were already cleared before they even arrive. After 2 days off, the protagonist returns to work, but is shocked by what he sees, because the captain of the operations team has gone to see his boss, and Kim wonders if he's been found out. In turn, Soo-young says he's on a field visit, claiming that sometimes it's necessary to interact with other teams to develop camaraderie. The protagonist knows that's complete nonsense, since Soo-young doesn't care at all about the cleaning team, and he thinks the only reason for the visit must be because the captain suspects he's the one intercepting the dungeons. Park cuts the tension and says he'll bring an extra outfit for the captain. But Soo-young says that won't be necessary, since he's only going to observe from a distance. After they go inside, the boss says this is going to take a while and asks how much time they still have. Han Sang-hek says 1 hour if they hurry. Kim tells Minju to apply the chemicals to the bodies to soften them and make clean faster. The boss asks how the gas level is. Monsieur Yan says it's at 150 micrograms per square meter, since the bodies are decomposing really fast. Han says it's not just the bodies. There's also a lot of blood in the hallways, and it needs to be scrubbed again. Meanwhile, Soo-young thinks they're just trying to show off because he's there, and wonders if he should throw out some bait. Soon after, he decides to talk to Minju, and asks if she knows anything about the interceptions that happened in the last 2 days. Protagonist thinks that Minju probably believes he's a freelance hunter. So as she opens her mouth, not only Soo-young but the whole group will conclude that Kim was the one who intercepted the dungeons on his days off, and he thinks Soo-young is trying to read the room. In turn, Minju says the buzz among the hunters must be huge. Soo-young says they're watching the suspects, but it's not easy to locate the culprits. But he states that an incredible reward has been offered for anyone who reports the interceptor. So the hunter who catches the culprit will receive extra points in the ranking evaluation. And if another team ends up catching him, there will be a personnel transfer. In other words, if the clean team catches the interceptor, they can move to another team. Soo-young says that if anyone from this team has something interesting, they can speak to him directly, especially if they know someone who disappeared in the last 2 days. With that, the protagonist thinks he's screwed because with a reward like that, his teammates won't be able to resist. Therefore, the fastest one wins. Soo-young may have entered the association through nepotism, but Kim had forgotten that he's not stupid. Then Park speaks to Kim and asks if he's feeling better now, since he got hurt yesterday. The protagonist realizes what the boss is trying to do. Park says he warned him to be careful when dismantling monsters. So Ian agrees and says luckily, he got hurt yesterday, and not on the day the boss decided to pay a visit. Han Sang-hek adds that he knew something like this would happen when he saw Kim getting too comfortable at work. After that, Park says that Chief Soo-young made a very good offer. They don't know anyone who fits the description he gave. He also says they would love to switch teams, and if they find anyone suspicious, they'll report it immediately. Soo-young didn't expect that. He wonders if these people have gone crazy from overworking. Even Minju realizes what the team is doing, protecting one of their own. Later, Soo-young returns to the company headquarters and calls his superior, saying he went to the field, and he's sure it was that suspicious janitor who did the interceptions, but says he just returned to work now. However, Director Shu Min-chil simply says they should increase the cleaning team's budget. Soo-young asks why he argues that the janitor should be disciplined. The director says they're just suffering the consequences of messing with the wrong person, and affirms that that janitor is not normal. He also says he suspects Kim's true nature, which leaves Soo-yen quite surprised. The protagonist had previously gone to a bank, still covered in filth after leaving the dungeon. A boy even thought he was bleeding, but his mother told him not to draw attention, especially from strangers. In turn, Kim thinks that if he won't get a budget increase through proper means, then he'll give them a reason to change their minds. Back on the call, Soo-young is outraged that the director has backed down from the matter, since he wants to punish the cleaning team. However, the director says they just received an anonymous donation to the support fund a short while ago, specifically designated for the cleaning team, in roughly the same amount that was intercepted. Soo-young says this only confirms further that the janitor is responsible, since right after the interception ended, a similar amount was deposited. But Shu Min-chil says this makes it an even bigger problem, because it only confirms who the culprit is. He says that if someone had interception abilities and chose to lie low in the cleaning team, it would only make them more dangerous. The director says that if it were him, he would never do that. He would look for a way to climb the ranks, not waste time doing dirty work. Not only that, he says something felt off from the start, since the janitor walked straight into his office to ask for a raise, and he knew everything about the association, including internal details. This only makes the director think there's something in the cleaning team that shouldn't be there, so that guy must be a janitor in name only, because the director believes he's actually someone from inside the association, probably tied to someone powerful. Maybe even the association president himself. And Shu Min-chil says the president personally doesn't like him. With that, Soo-young realizes why Kim's team covered for him, and the director's theory starts to make sense. Now the director says they better start working properly from now on, because they're being washed. And if one of them falls, the other goes down too. Back to the protagonist. He thinks that apparently the interception case has been handled. Now what's left is for the deposit he made to reflect in the increased budget. Until suddenly he sees something unusual ahead. The team leader also finds it odd since they didn't place any orders. But when they open the boxes, they realize their new cleaning equipment. With that, Park asks what happened at headquarters for them to send this. For his part, the protagonist thinks that apparently his plan worked, and he sees that the association sent a letter. He figures it probably says that an anonymous donor sent the equipment, but he thinks that's a bit much for the amount he deposited, until the boss reveals that the letter says, the budget was increased by 200 million won, an amount that the protagonist says is 10 times what he deposited. The letter states that after a careful review, the association concluded that the deterioration of equipment due to budget cuts had a serious impact on the accident. Therefore, headquarters decided to provide additional funds. They even apologize and offer an apology to Miss Seo Yun, in addition to reconsidering her compensation. Such a statement leaves everyone in the group completely stunned. Not only that, but along with the budget increase. So Yun received 100 million won in compensation for the workplace accident. She gets super happy and thanks Kim for it, but he says he didn't do anything. Park says the association simply changed its mind, and that's something he's never seen happen before. Even so, as it's written in the letter, the decision has been made, and they don't need to know who did it or why. They just need to be thankful. Besides, they need to move all of this to the office, because they can't just leave it lying around. Kim didn't even know they had an office. Park says it's because it's completely useless. Minju asks where the office is, and offers to carry everything there with her mentor. But the boss says they can all help carry it together. Still, she insists and says that only the two of them should handle it. For his part, the protagonist decides to check his system, and sees that the condition has been met due to the budget increase, and his Hellfire skill has been unlocked. With that, he says, it won't be long until he says goodbye to the cleaning team, and returns to being an elite hunter. Now that the two of them are alone, Minju asks if it was Kim who did the interceptions in the last couple of days. Kim says that if it were him, what would Minju do? She says not to worry. She wouldn't attack someone just to score some extra points. Minju also asks if he used the money from the interceptions to donate to the cleaning team support fund. Kim says yes. The hunter says the other team members probably know that too, but since it would get him in trouble, they're being careful about what they say. She also says that no matter how much a talented person tries to hide their abilities, it will always be visible to others, because Kim's skill is at a level that can't be hidden, even if he wants to and even if he escapes now. Next time he might get caught, and if that happens it will be hard to stay on the cleaning team. Thinking about it, Kim figures he can use that to his advantage. He never imagined the day would come when he'd be helped by Minju, and he finally appreciates her joining the cleaning team. However, unlike him, Minju is actually enjoying being on the cleaning team, and she asks if her teacher will stay too. Kim is surprised by her reaction, but she says she'll help him stay on the cleaning team forever. Now Minju is a B rank hunter, but she says that if she reaches a rank, she can help him stay hidden on the cleaning team. But little does she know that the protagonist's intention is exactly the opposite. Sometime later, Kim notices the results of his dungeon interceptions, because various graffiti start appearing on the walls. Not only that, but when they went in to clean, the mess was worse than usual, with insults written on the walls. Monster blood was splattered everywhere, and the bodies had been scattered around on purpose. Han Sang-hyuk gets angry and suggests going after those responsible. The protagonist says that's not a good idea, and tells them to just forget it and move on. His suggestion isn't well received, but Kim knows that based on the circumstantial evidence, the hunters from the operations team did this. Kim would actually like to go after them, but he needs to avoid conflicts with the operations team to unlock more abilities and hopes they won't do it again. However, his expectations aren't met because 3 days later, it still hasn't stopped. The cleaning team thinks this is unfair, and they suggest to the boss that they file a complaint against the operations team. Park says he'd already tried that, but their captain is away on a trip, and the team itself denies having done it, since the janitors can't prove anything. Han then suggests asking for help from Hunter Minju. The protagonist tells him not to do that, because he'll handle the situation himself, and he tells them not to clean the place until he gets back. Kim is extremely irritated about all this, especially since one of his passive skills activated, without him even realizing it. He says he's already exhausted from his normal routine, and now a bunch of punks are making him work 15 hours a day. So he wants to put an end to this once and for all. Then he heads to the association headquarters in Seoul and arrives, kicking the door down. Some hunters don't like such behavior and get annoyed, but Kim can only think about solving this situation today. The protagonist thinks this is happening because of what went down 3 days ago. A flashback shows that when a dungeon opened, the operations team headed out, and upon running into the cleaning team, they started hurling insults. They didn't care at all whether the team heard or not, because they were pissed that their budget increase had affected other teams after hearing so many insults. The cleaning team gets angry and Han Sang-hyuk tries to confront them, until Minju shows up and asks who they are. The guys from the operations team, full of arrogance, treat her like a nobody, but Minju takes on a more serious stance and repeats her question. One of the guys says it doesn't matter where they're from, and that she wouldn't understand even if he explained, until the other guy realizes who she is and says, this is the sunbae from their team named Kim Minju. Then they say they're very sorry and apologize. Minju asks why they're sorry and says, not even she knew they were on the same team, and says that before apologizing for not recognizing her, they should apologize for acting like animals. After scolding them, she goes over to her teammates and asks if they're okay. They say yes. Minju says, there are always newbies who think they're something, just because they become hunters, and she apologizes for what happened. The so-called newbies don't like that at all, but now they can't say anything and swallow their anger. Shortly after, the boss greets everyone and asks if they're ready to start another day of work. Minju says she's only there today to say goodbye. She says she learned a lot during this time, and Park thanks her for her help during the period. Meanwhile, Kim concludes that Minju worked with them for a week, and he thinks maybe she learns fast, and now managed to fully understand a person's workload, at least for now, as they say goodbye. So Yen is sad that she won't have her teammate around anymore, and tells Minju to drop by once in a while to say hi. Seeing that, the protagonist wonders how close they became in just 1 week. Everyone felt sad about her departure except him, because he was the one who asked Minju to leave. When Kim told her not to work with them anymore, Minju was quite shocked, but she quickly understood why, because it meant Kim had agreed to her request for training. So he created a dungeon attack schedule for her, believing that as long as Minju follows his guidance, she could reach rank A within half a year. And since he himself can't be like he was in his past life, he plans to turn Minju into the best hunter, and use her as a tool to negotiate with the association. Even after coming back, the protagonist still holds on to his selfish thoughts, and sees people merely as tools. But not everyone is like him, because in contrast, Minju sees him as a mentor, and thanks him for everything she has learned. She says that if he ever needs anything, he can call her anytime and ask for help. Either way, Minju left the cleaning team, and within a day that vandalism began. Their boss went to headquarters to try to resolve the situation, but it only got worse since the troublemakers mocked him and escalated the vandalism even further. Turns out the protagonist knew exactly who the culprits were, and as soon as he finds them, he greets the first one with a clean punch to the face. Before the other could react, he becomes a target too. As a hunter, he tries to use his skills to defend himself, thinking that a mere janitor wouldn't be able to fight back, but the protagonist dodges with ease. The thug then says the janitor shouldn't be provoking a hunter, and declares that today will be his end. In return, Kim answers with another clean punch, after disabling both of them, without even needing to use his abilities. Kim says it must have been really fun, doing stupid things and laughing about it afterward, but now it's over. Not to mention that using abilities outside of dungeons is prohibited, and as a hunter he should know that. The thug says the janitor won't get away with this so easily, but the protagonist asks how he dares interrupt him, and punches him again, saying that this thug is too much of a coward to be a hunter. He also says that from now on, he won't clean any dungeon that he or his buddy clear, and I'll spread everything they've done online and to traditional media. The thug says the association won't allow that, and they'll surely side with the hunters, not a janitor. However, Kim says the association won't cover for them anymore, because he's just a small fry who's only just started. But he says if the guy wants to keep his job, he should go to the cleaning team and apologize for everything. The rookie doesn't like that suggestion, so Kim says the other option is to take off his badge and face him in a dungeon. In the midst of all that, Soo-young appears and asks what all the commotion is about. Kim thought Soo-young was away on a business trip, just like Park said, and if he gets caught by him now, things could get complicated. But Soo-young greets the protagonist politely and asks if the budget increase wasn't enough. Seeing Soo-young's sudden change in behavior, protagonist simply says, "These rookies have been making a mess in the dungeons," and explains in detail what happened. The rookie claims it's all a lie and accuses the protagonist of using gratuitous violence against a hunter, but this time, it's the boss himself who hits him, and Soo-young asks if he even knows who he's accusing. Soo-young goes over to Kim and apologizes properly for the situation. Kim doesn't quite understand why he's being treated so politely, but accepts the apology and tells Soo-young to just keep his boys in line. Then he walks toward the exit. But before that he says it would be best if those boys didn't show up in front of him again after the situation was resolved. Kim was left wondering about Soo-young's change in behavior, and asked Minju if she had any idea why. She says she took a week off and doesn't remember anything unusual, but adds that pathetic rank E rookies shouldn't cause more trouble. Kim says that even so, they apologized properly and he gave them a serious scolding, so he doubts it will happen again. Minju says that even if they wanted to, they can't be troublemakers anymore because both of them were fired. That information takes the protagonist by surprise. Kim wonders if it's because he said he didn't want to see them in front of him again, but he doesn't understand why they would have done that. After all, he's just a janitor. That, combined with the fact that Soo-young was so polite, leaves the protagonist even more confused, as if all that weren't enough. The next day when he goes to work, the hunters who came out of the dungeons waited for them to arrive, just to thank the cleaning team for their work. The whole group was confused, but even so they continued with their job. This praise from the hunters continued for several days. Not only that, but they also started helping. By organizing the cleanup inside the dungeons, they began to pile up the bodies in one spot, instead of leaving them scattered, something that pleased the team. And Park says that their work is finally being recognized, but he tells the others not to get cocky about it, and just keep doing their job, as they always have, also giving credit to Kim. So Yun says she's glad Kim is part of the team, but she's worried about something. The protagonist doesn't understand the reason for her concern until Yun says that he could get into trouble because of the cleaning team, since they're being watched, and some hunter might end up targeting him. Kim says only if someone's angry or something like that, and in any case he reassures her and says everything will be fine. So Yun agrees and says, it's not like Kim did anything wrong or anything like that, until Han butts into the conversation and says that Kim asked for a budget increase, stepped over some hunters, and now the operations team is watching them. He then says that Kim might be behind everything, since apparently he's someone so important that not even the higher UPS dare to offend him. The protagonist is quite surprised, but shortly after he starts laughing and tells Han to stop joking around and get back to work. The scene cuts to Soo-young, and we see that he's apparently lost a few nights of sleep. One of his colleagues asks if he's really keeping an eye on the cleaning team. His name is Lim Dong-bin, the leader of Operations Team 2, and he says that Operations Team 1 was assigned to watch the janitors, and finds that extremely strange. In turn, Soo-young says his colleague doesn't know anything, and should just keep his mouth shut, and not get in the way of other people's work. Dong-bin stays quiet, but before that, he asks if the president knows about this, because there are some rumors going around. He also says that sometimes the best thing to do is nothing at all, because that's how some people land better positions. In the association with his patience running out, Soo-young says that if his colleague is done talking, he can leave, but instead, Lim Dong-bin says he can handle everything if Soo-young wants, and says that the janitor who's stepping out of line needs to be held accountable, and he can play the role of boss in his colleague's place. Soo-young asks what he intends to do. Dong-bin says nothing extreme, just what needs to be done. Not even the president could cover up a mistake that big. With that, Soo-young asks what the cleaning team did wrong. Dong-bin replies nothing yet. So Soo-young wonders what his crazy colleague is planning to do. Dong-bin asks if Yang plans to babysit the cleaning team for the rest of his life, because as the leader of Operations Team 1, that's not right. Then Soo-young asks what his colleague wants, and Dong-bin says he learns fast. Dong-bin says it's nothing difficult because next week, Yang's team will have a big job with the multiple dungeon in Yangdingpo. Soo-young knows that a multiple dungeon is when a second dungeon opens, immediately after defeating the boss of the first one. They're usually of regular rank, but the difficulty goes up, since you can't leave until all the bosses are defeated. So preparations take about a month. It's so important that it takes that long, just to build an operational plan. However, Dongbin says he'll handle it. Soo-young asks if that's not too much for him. His colleague tells him not to worry, and that the director has already given permission, so it's already decided. Dongbin is the type of leader who steals other people's work and takes all the credit. But Soo-young knows he can't touch the cleaning team, and to him it's obvious someone else would do it in his place anyway. And he thinks that, if this opportunist takes over the cleaning team, that'll be one less problem for him. So he agrees with the plan, but says he doesn't want any problems on his side. Dongbin agrees, and he says he heard about a rising girl in Soo-young's team, named Kim Min-ju, so he wants her in his own team, after the mission is over. With that, Soo-young understands his colleague's true intentions, but says that if he wants her on his team, he should talk directly to Min-ju. Back to the protagonist, he takes the bus home. Meanwhile, he takes the opportunity to check his system, and sees that the situation now is different, compared to when he had just returned. In time, things are going well, and it has become easier to unlock abilities. Kim thinks about which skill he should try to unlock next, until his phone starts ringing. He sees it's Min-ju and asks if something happened. Min-ju says they're heading into a double dungeon, and she was chosen as the operation leader. Kim didn't expect a dungeon like that to appear this time of year, but he asks if that's really all, because if she's the operation leader, it means her value as a hunter is rising. She says that's not important, and called to let him know that the clean team will also be part of the operation. The group heading to the double dungeon gets ready, but they're not happy at all, since everyone is angry at the janitors for getting their salaries cut to raise theirs, and now they'll have to cooperate with the cleaning team, and there's nothing they can do about it. All of Park's team was summoned and went to the meeting, until in the middle of it, one of the hunters decides to provoke them a little. For his part, the protagonist thinks all of them are rank B hunters, which makes them replaceable. He then asks why they didn't call the first operations team for this mission. Min-ju says that's how it used to be, but the second team ended up getting this one. Kim asks why her boss handed such an important mission to another team. At the last minute, Min-ju isn't sure, as the leaders decided it among themselves. Then the second team leader arrives, and Lim Dongbin asks how everyone's doing. As soon as he sees who it is, the protagonist immediately recognizes him, since they had dealings in his past life. Kim remembers when he was a hunter, and Lim Dongbin stole several jobs from him, and was always known for doing that to others. That's why the protagonist becomes furious upon seeing him again. He then tells Min-ju to stay away from that guy, saying he's human trash in response. Lim Dongbin says the estimated duration of the operation is 24 hours, and no one can leave the dungeon until all the bosses are killed. So if anyone doesn't want to participate, now is the time to leave, since no one says anything. Lim Dongbin suggests reviewing the plan. Then he says the hunters will be split into 3 groups. That way they'll kill all the monsters faster, because if it takes too long, the monsters will release gas, which will affect everyone. After that, Clean Team 3 will go in to eliminate any gas inside. Since it's a large operation, there will be a bonus for the hard work, and he asks the cleaning team if they can handle it. Park says on behalf of the team that yes, they can. The protagonist thinks there's no reason to refuse. It's a good opportunity, and the job will be easier by teaming up with the operation squad, not to mention the completion bonus. Besides that, he'll be able to unlock a new skill, and if he doesn't do it now, he might not get another chance. After all, he's just a janitor. However, there's a crucial factor in this situation. Kim doesn't want to help Lim Dongbin, and so he refuses the job. After that, his team wonders why Kim didn't accept, since it's a good opportunity for everyone. Ark suggests maybe Kim is worried about his teammates. Min-ju says she is too. After all, this operation is dangerous, and they'll have to stay 24 hours inside a dungeon, surrounded by monsters. The team leader says Kim knows the risks and wanted to spare them. That's why he refused. So they shouldn't ignore his feelings and need to refuse too. So Yun says Kim is so considerate. Han agrees, saying he almost made a mistake by accepting the job. Park then says that as the team leader, he'll report that they won't be part of the operation. For her part, Minju says she won't accept it either. They don't understand after all. She was assigned as the operation leader. But Minju says she didn't like this from the start and doesn't feel ready to be a leader. Moreover, she also doesn't want to shake the trust she has with her teacher, and says that, in moments like this, it's best to follow what her master taught her. That Park says she's right. Shortly after, the news of their withdrawal spreads throughout the company, and Soo-young can't hide his joy. He imagines the look on Dong-bin's face when he found out. Then he says he warned not to mess with the wrong person, because he himself tried once and realized long ago who he was dealing with. But Dong-bin doesn't like being mocked and tells Soo-young to leave. However, the tables have turned and this time it's Dong-bin who has to endure. So Soo-young doesn't miss the chance to tease him. Soo-young takes out all his pinned-up anger on his colleague, until Dong-bin gets really irritated and says, "That's enough." He says he's going to use the director's authority this time and open a mandatory participation list, because in emergency operations, these lists are created under the director's authority, and those who don't comply can face disciplinary action, or even be expelled. Dong-bin says that some inexperience. Nobody's dared to get on his nerves, and he wants to make them pay. A few days later, the team receives word that Dong-bin made a mandatory participation list, and they were all included. Not only that, but a dungeon of this scale draws attention from the entire national media, and they had to appear in front of all that. Until Ken notices that Minju is just as dissatisfied as he is, and he asks if the operation leader is nervous. She says no, just a bit uneasy since it's her first time doing this. Kim tells her to try and look more confident, because when the hunters get nervous, everyone else does too. Minju says she's better at fighting than dealing with the press. In any case, Kim tells her that once she goes in, she should focus on finishing the dungeon, and not worry about the cleaning team. She understands but tells her teacher to keep the radio on. The protagonist agrees but says she shouldn't call him for help, and the radio is only for emergencies. Before entering, Park asks if everyone has their first aid kits and proper equipment. They go over their inventory and make sure they have everything they need. On top of that, Han says they also have plenty of food and water. So the boss says that even though this operation is tough, they should work like they always do and give their best. Inside, from a distance, a few hunters mock the cleaning team, until the team leader himself shows up, and sarcastically says that the beloved cleaning team showed up, alongside leader Kim Min-ju. He wishes her good luck and Min-ju thanks him. So Yoon thought Min-ju wouldn't go, but Kim explains that she's the leader. Besides participating in the subjugation, she's also leading the operation, and sometimes a very skilled hunter ends up becoming the operations leader. So Yoon asks if Min-ju is really that good. Kim says yes. She obviously has the qualifications to be a leader. There's another reason why Dong-bin didn't want to lead this operation. He doesn't know how to do anything except give orders, and just sits back and watches. He's never actually led an operation, but he always reaps the credit. Meanwhile, Dong-bin says he'll be watching over everyone, and tells them not to be nervous, because if they have any problems, they can just report it. Minju says she understands, but Dong-bin doesn't like the lack of enthusiasm in her expression. He also tells the clean team to be careful, and warns them not to slow down the hunters. The protagonist responds with little enthusiasm, that the clean team will do their best right away. Dong-bin gets irritated with him too, and wonders how long they're going to keep this up. Either way, he tells the operation leader to relay the instructions to the others. Then Minju says they'll be split into teams A. B and C. Team A will go first. B will follow and C will finish. That way, they'll move through the dungeon in this order until they exit, and the cleaning team will accompany them. They already know how dungeons work, so there's no need to worry about them. Even so, she says, this dungeon is dangerous, and if anything happens, they should ask the cleaning team for help. The others can't believe what they just heard. Even the protagonist wonders what Minju is talking about. Dong-bin says that the operation leader must be so nervous that she even got her words mixed up. Anyway, Minju says they should double-check everything before starting, because they'll enter as soon as everything is ready. The cleaning team stands before the dungeon entrance, and they get ready to go in too, because they want to clear this dungeon quickly. Already inside the dungeon, the clean team is working at full speed. Mun So-yun says she was a little scared at first, but now she finds it kind of easy. Kim says this job is like any other, and there's nothing special about it. Han says he'd like to see the hunters fighting. Park says there's no point in that because their job is to clean, not get in the hunters' way. He also says that now that they finished dissecting the monsters, they should clean the rest, because the gas can't be allowed to spread. And the bodies need to be vacuum sealed. This is a large operation and they have to be as careful as possible. Normally they would pile up the bodies and burn them, but since this is a real-time operation, that won't be possible. So they have to vacuum seal the bodies to prevent decomposition. They even cut them into pieces and applied some chemicals. A real professional job. Han, however, finds doing it that way more disgusting. He also asks when they'll stop to eat. The boss says they barely started, and Han is already talking about food until. So Yun shows up with some chocolate bars and offers them to everyone. She also offers one to Kim, but notices he doesn't like being interrupted during work, and backs off. But to her surprise, Kim says he'd like one of the chocolate bars. So he eats and So Yun enjoys seeing him like that, even imagines him as a cute animal. Park says that after that, he even feels better and will be able to work more. This is the team's first major job, and since they're doing what they always do, there's no problem. 8 hours later, the group has already sealed multiple pieces of monster remains. The hunter's job was easy, but the situation for the cleaning team was different. After 10 hours inside, they began to get tired. After 15 hours, Han fell asleep and hurt his hand. Fortunately, it wasn't a serious injury. On top of that, one of the bags containing monster meat exploded. Kim got really exhausted trying to fix the issue. The difference between the teams just kept growing. Sometime later, the operations team contacts them by radio and says, the gas seems to have increased, telling them to check the situation. Park apologizes for this, and says they fell behind due to the work overload. The operations team asks where they are. Park says they're in Zone 5. The operations team leader says they're already in Zone 10, so they're way behind. Park says he'll take a break and try to move forward as quickly as possible. But the operations team leader says he must be crazy, because the gap between them will only grow, and this is no time for a break. Kim takes over the radio and says everyone is tired, so they can't move forward now. They should also take a break. The operations team refuses, but Kim says they can't go on like this. He can't convince the operations team, and says the clean team will solve its own problems and keep working. Kim then says they should send over a few hunters who aren't doing anything to help with the cleanup. That way the job would be faster. On the other end, that suggestion isn't received well, and they refuse to do it. But at the height of his anger, the protagonist demands that the hunter pass the radio to his boss. Right now, sometime later, Dongbin shows up and asks why they're behind schedule, since they said they could handle it alone. He also says the gas is spreading, so they should be cleaning instead of complaining. The protagonist walks up and asks where Minju is. Dongbin says he doesn't need to know, because no one is in there to play around. Kim says they've been working 18 hours straight, and everything has a limit. They need to rest a little. Dongbin then asks if Kim is saying that the clean team is refusing to do its job. He also says the clean team has no authority with him, and on top of that, they're delaying the whole operation because of that. He says to forget the promised bonus. Kim asks why. Dongbin says they neglected their duty, failed to follow instructions, and fell far behind the operations team. He says that since this is their first time in an operation like this, they probably have no idea how something like this is structured to succeed, and mistakes like this can't be overlooked. But in the middle of Dongbin's furious rant, the protagonist starts laughing. Kim says that Dongbin must have planned this from the start, even going as far as to create a mandatory participation list. He says Dongbin only wanted them there to humiliate them in front of everyone else, and that means he's a terrible operations leader. The protagonist adds that Dongbin has no idea how clean work actually functions, and has no moral ground to scold them. Dongbin says that if he keeps behaving like that, not even the company president will cover for him. But Kim says that if they abandon the operation now, things will get worse. The gas will continue to spread, and no one else will be able to handle it except for them. After that, Dongbin grabs the radio and asks if Minju is very busy right now. She says yes and asks why he's calling her. Out of nowhere, Dongbin says the cleaning team is abandoning the operation, and for that reason she will no longer be the leader, because Dongbin claims he is taking command right now. Minju doesn't understand, but he says that this operation isn't worthy of being led by someone like her. In turn, Kim says that Dongbin hasn't changed at all, and is still the same scumbag as ever. Dongbin asks what he's talking about over the radio. Minju asks her teacher if it's true that he and the cleaning team have abandoned the mission. Kim simply says that Minju can't do anything about it now, but asks if she wants to die in there. Minju doesn't quite understand what he means, and she thinks for a moment about what she just heard. Frustrated, Dongbin says that Minju must hand over leadership to him right now, or everyone will die. He also says that he's the one who allowed her to lead, and as her superior he has the final word. Minju then says she will hand over leadership, and Dongbin gets excited. But then she says that Kim will be the leader instead of her, which leaves everyone speechless. She says she's passing the title of leader to him and the clean team. From now on, this catches everyone by surprise except the protagonist, since that was exactly what he wanted. It's been a while since he last led an operation, but now he wants to show these amateurs what real leadership looks like. Kim then says that from now on, he is the leader of this operation. The others don't like it one bit, including Dongbin, who starts laughing, saying that a janitor could never be the leader of an operation like this. He also says there was a misunderstanding and that, in reality, he is the operation leader, not Kim, because someone like Kim could never lead. The protagonist says that actually, Dongbin is the one who's mistaken and affirms that even as a janitor, he can lead the operation. Dongbin then asks if he's a hunter by any chance. Kim asks if that even matters to Dongbin. Yes, since he believes janitors are responsible for cleaning, not for organizing operations like this. Kim then asks if Dongbin is suggesting that he himself is the most qualified to lead. Dongbin says exactly, and even threatens to discipline the cleaning team. Protagonist says that being disciplined or not depends on Dongbin, but beyond that he says that whenever he looks at Dongbin, he's reminded of his own past, and that doesn't sit well with him at all. He also says that ever since he came back, he's been improving more and more each day. Dongbin doesn't understand what he means and gets confused. Kim says the only thing he needs to understand is that he's out of the operation, and doesn't need to do anything else. Being removed from the operation is a top-level disciplinary action that prevents the individual from participating or receiving any benefits during the mission. Dongbin knows this and panics. Kim takes his radio and asks if this is the first time Dongbin is being disciplined. In any case, he announces over the radio that he is the leader of the cleaning team and informs everyone about the disciplinary action, stating that from this moment on, Dongbin is out of the operation. So he tells everyone to do their best, and to follow his instructions from now on. First of all, Kim says that teams B and C, where currently idle, will assist the cleaning team. The hunters refuse, saying they didn't become hunters just to camp with the cleaning team. In that case, the protagonist says that teams B and C are out of the operation due to lack of cooperation, leaving everyone furious, but Kim doesn't even care. He picks up the radio and asks if Tima is listening. Minju says yes, so he tells them they're short-staffed, will have to push themselves harder. Kim asks if she's in Area 11. Minju says she is, but there's a monster that's hard to defeat, and she explains the situation. The protagonist says that whenever you attack a bear, it becomes immune to damage for about 10 minutes, so they need to form a formation with a Guardian class member, because once the bear's immunity wears off, it'll target the Guardian, and if a monster builds momentum, it deals a lot of damage and gets tired, so after that, they can attack again and catch the enemy in its weakest state. Minju says everyone heard the plan and now they'll carry it out. The group's healer stays in the rear, buffing the Guardian, and then the bear prepares to attack. But the Guardian's defense blocks the bear's strike, leaving it vulnerable for a counterattack. Minju takes charge of that and charges her skill. She strikes the bear directly right on its weak spot. After that, Minju realizes the plan worked, and says over the radio that they cleared Area 11. The other hunters hear that, and can't believe a janitor's strategy worked. For his part, Kim says they'll take 50 minutes to finish this dungeon. Then in Area 12 there's a ghost-type monster. Kim says physical attacks won't work, so the mage should use fire magic and the rest stay in the rear. The next monster is hallucinogenic type, so Kim tells the healer to purify the others, and they should avoid keeping distance and keep attacking. Upon hearing this, the other hunters wonder how a simple janitor knows so much about combat strategy. Meanwhile, Kim keeps commanding everything through the radio until Minju says, everyone is tired and she's out of mana. Not to mention everyone's physical condition is in terrible shape. He asks what kind of hunters get tired this easily. Either way, he tells them to hold on a bit longer until reinforcements arrive. So Minju tries to hold the line and fights with all her remaining strength. But this time she's facing a stone monster. She says this one is weird and very different from the others. Besides being tough and big, it's also fast until due to a lapse. She gets grabbed by the monster and with no way to escape, Minju is slammed against the ground. As a result of that hit, she's badly hurt and vulnerable. But luckily for her, someone approaches and she realizes it's her teacher. Reaching his hand out to her, Minju says she couldn't hold on. Maybe she's not as strong as she thought. But then Kim asks for her sword. That's why he held out his hand. The hunter thought her teacher was helping her up, but someone else had to do that since Kim only wanted a weapon. For his part, Kim says it was obvious there'd be a red rank monster in this dungeon, and it's a little tricky to deal with. However, he knows exactly what to do because thanks to this operation, he unlocked another of his abilities. Then he activates the skill called excessive immersion. With it, he can enhance any of his other abilities. The enemy attacks with a punch. The protagonist not only dodges, he counterattacks with speed and strength. He then strikes the enemy's hand, which causes a blood-like liquid to leak from it that only makes the monster angrier, and it begins to attack more violently. But it can only hit the ground because through the smoke, the protagonist appears completely unharmed. Next, he activates his skill called piercing. Not only that, but he also has a damage boost bonus for hitting the enemy's weak point. Knowing this, Kim strikes the monster exactly where needed and manages to burn it from the inside out, causing a combustion inside the stone giant. The others ask who this guy is. Minju says he's just a janitor, but they don't believe it. No janitor can fight like that, and they even suggest launching an investigation. But their superior tells everyone to keep what they just saw a secret and says that her teacher doesn't care about anything hunters normally aim for his part. The protagonist system alerts him that he just activated a passive effect that causes tuberculosis-like symptoms when using too much power, which makes him really pissed off. After leaving the dungeon, news spreads in the media that Dong Bin was expelled from the operation, and even blackmailed association members with the promise of a bonus. Soon his boss becomes extremely furious and asks how a leader could be expelled from one of the most important operations the association has ever had. Dong Bin can't say anything other than apologize, but he claims it was all thanks to Minju and the janitor, who were working together to sabotage things. However, his boss tells him to stop trying to weasel out and quit making excuses and says he already knows Dong Bin was trying to steal credit from Minju. Cornered, Dong Bin says it wasn't just his fault. After all, it was his own boss who issued the mandatory participation list. More than just irritated, the boss stands up and grabs Dong Bin by the hair, saying that they are not friends, and that Dong Bin needs to know his place and stop trying to act like he has more authority than his own superior. He also says that now that the media is aware of his mistake, there's no way to let it slide. So he tells Dong Bin that he's going to walk out and write a leave of absence. With that, Dong Bin runs out of the boss's office. So Young, who had been silent until now, tells the general director that Dong Bin might end up telling the janitor, who helped him set up this situation. The general director realizes that and suggests an alternative, then asks what Su Yung thinks about promoting Minju to team leader. Shortly after, Dong Bin and the rest of Operations Team 2 were disciplined, except Dong Bin had his rank demoted. And for a hunter, that's the worst thing that can happen. On the other hand, the cleaning team celebrates and says that Minju finally received the recognition she deserves. Minju is deeply grateful for being promoted, especially for being recognized by her former colleagues on the cleaning team. She even ends up crying from the emotion. For his part, the protagonist doesn't understand why everyone is so emotional. Minju says she couldn't talk to them before because everything happened so fast. So Yen asks if she'll be the boss from now on. Han says yes. After all, Minju is now the leader of the operations team, on the same level as Su Yun. But Minju says that even so, she still doesn't have much experience. Besides, her office is a bit empty. Kim says there's nothing she can do about that, since so many people left all at once. Minju says that in total 17 hunters left, practically more than half the team, so she can't help but think she was only promoted because of that. Kim says being too humble is annoying, and that not just anyone can become an operations leader, so she should be more proud of herself. In Minju's mind, she was just praised by her teacher, even if indirectly, but for Kim, he's actually irritated that he never achieved something like that before the age of 30. Either way, Minju says that it's all thanks to her teacher, because he's the one who helped her. But the protagonist tells her not to say that in front of others, because her colleagues will never respect her. She goes around saying a janitor helped her. Besides, many were expelled because of Kim, and he's made a few enemies. After that, the remaining team members arrive in the room, and one of them says that the support team will be a little late. Then they notice the cleaning team inside, and greet them very politely, saying it's an honor to finally meet them. They're also amazed to meet Kim, saying he was incredible during the operation, and they even ask to be treated as if they were part of the same team, offering to support anything Kim needs. Kim feels uncomfortable with all the excitement, and Minju says they're quite reliable, so now no one will get in the cleaning team's way anymore. Now they can work in peace. Kim realizes the leader herself is pretty enthusiastic, until Minju says that one person is still missing. Protagonist asks who. Minju says the support team said they would send an assistant, and Kim understands that she's now a respected leader, because a personal assistant is only assigned to operations team leaders, as he himself had one in his past life. Then he remembers his former assistant. Her name was Lee Iao, and she used to work full-time when Kim was active. In fact, she was there when the protagonist died, besides having been the person who spent the most time with him back then. Now she probably works at the association in a different position. So Kim asks if Minju knows the name of the assistant who will be working with her. Minju says she doesn't. Kim thinks that even if it were Lee Iao, he wouldn't have anything to say to her, since the two of them don't know each other in this life. Then the clean team decides to leave and let Minju work. The protagonist takes the lead, but as soon as he opens the door, he comes face to face with the assistant. She introduces herself as Song Hyun from the support team. Coldly, Kim says he's not Minju, so the girl should introduce herself to her boss, not to him. She becomes extremely embarrassed, but Minju welcomes her warmly and says that from now on, they'll be working together. Park tells his team they should go so they don't end up late. Minju tells them to be careful on their way back, and the first impression Kim gave the assistant was quite terrifying. Sometime later at the association building, Song Hye-yen says she's really tired. It's only been 2 months since she was hired, and they already made her an assistant. Then someone appears and asks if her current boss isn't really nice. Song calls her deputy manager. Lia Yen, the deputy manager, asks if she was assigned to team leader Minju of Team 2, the one that was almost disbanded. Song says yes, but the problem isn't Minju. It's the director, who apparently doesn't care much about her. But Lee says that staying out of Shu Minchel's line of sight means she's doing a great job. Sun Hae Jaeun doesn't understand how that makes sense. Either way, Lee says she heard that Minju has a good relationship with a janitor, who's rumored to be backed by the association's president himself. He asks if Song knows him and says that if she's smart, she should stick to him and never let go. The assistant says she met him, but didn't like him at all because he was terrifying. Song complains about Kim so much that the deputy manager gets a headache from hearing it, until Lee says that Kim apparently works really hard with the cleaning team because their budget was suddenly increased, and even the operations team members, who disrespected the cleaning team, were removed, all because of Kim's reputation. But Song says that as soon as a bigger problem comes up, she bets Kim will dodge the blame and pin it on someone else. Hearing all that makes Lee curious about Kim, and she says that now she wants to know more about what kind of person he is. Meanwhile, the protagonist, while working, feels a strange sensation, like someone is talking about him behind his back. Either way, the whole group is working in the dungeon. The protagonist is working too, but he seems pretty tired. Then Minju shows up and surprises him. Kim says she shouldn't be wasting time there, and should be working instead. But Minju says that this is work too. The newly promoted team leader is cleaning dungeons, and Kim says her team members must be thrilled. Minju didn't come alone. She brought her team too and put everyone to work cleaning as well, though they don't really know how to do it properly. until Park decides to help them with the details. So Yun says she needs help disinfecting, and the job won't get done if no one helps soon. Ninju's team offers to help, and says they're now one team in body and soul. Seeing this, Kim gives up on being serious. Shortly after, he asks what the real reason was for Minju bringing her team to help with cleaning. She says she's having trouble creating this month's operations plan. The protagonist now understands and asks what she needs. Minju says her team has a quota of 50 dungeons this month, but with the number of people she has now, she doesn't think it's possible. Kim says she might be right. Minju says that besides that, they told her that blue-grade dungeons won't count toward the quota. But Kim says that's nonsense. He says the main office assigns the lower-class dungeons randomly. For the association, it doesn't matter as long as it's a completed mission. Lower-grade dungeons do count, and they can be completed with as few as 4 people. So she can divide her members into 3 teams and clear 2 dungeons per day. Some people didn't even know how to do anything after being team leaders for 10 years. So Kim wonders what a brand new team leader like her could possibly know. Minju truly had no idea. She thanks him and says she always ends up owing something to her teacher. In turn, the protagonist says he already solved her problem, so Minju can lead and take her team with her, since they still need to clean the dungeon. With that, Minju asks if she's being a bother. Kim says she's not, but her assistant is. Minju asks if they already knew each other before. Kim says no, that he saw her for the first time at the office after that. Minju says that from her point of view, they've been staring intensely at each other since that day, and she thought they were exes. This leaves Kim quite embarrassed. Sun Hyeon says that Minju needs to attend the general operations meeting. The leader says they still have time and wants to stop and eat first. Minju tells the assistant to go ahead and make a reservation at a restaurant since phones don't work inside dungeons. Sun Hyeon then says she'll do that. Kim says phones do work in there. Minju knows it, says she needed to speak to him alone. Then she asked her teacher if he knows someone from the support team. Kim says no and asks why she's asking. Minju says she received a call from someone on the support team, saying they wanted to meet with him. But what's strange is that she asked Minju to keep it secret. From Song Hae-yun, the protagonist wonders why someone from the support team is looking for him and why it has to be in person. He thinks it might be because he destroyed the operations team, and they might be trying to intimidate him into not doing something like that again. So he agrees to the meeting and tells Minju to go ahead and set it up. Shortly after, they finish cleaning up, and Minju says she'll pay for everyone's lunch to celebrate her promotion. The next day, another dungeon appears. A frightened boy goes inside looking for his brother until he hears someone screaming. But it's not his brother, it's a monster. And it's the monster that's asking for help. The boy asks if the creature is okay. But the monster approaches him with a very terrifying look, which makes the boy cry in fear. Sometime later, the latest news circulates in the association stating that around noon, a middle school boy accidentally entered a dungeon and was attacked by a monster. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries, and the boy is under observation of the hospital. Witnesses claim there were no barriers protecting the dungeon entrance. Minju's boss calls her in, and she says she didn't know dungeons were accessible to the general public. But the boss says everyone knows that, and asks why she didn't place the barriers at the entrance, since that's basic procedure. Kim thinks it's lucky they found the boy while leaving the job, but they've been a few minutes later. They might not have found him alive. The boss demands that they provide explanations before things get worse until Kim takes the blame. He says he meant to place the barrier but forgot and went out to eat. Minju asks why he's doing this, since she remembers seeing him place the barrier. But the protagonist tells her not to raise her voice in front of the director. The boss asks if the mistake was made by the cleaning team, but Kim says no and takes full responsibility. Then the boss asks what the benefit is of taking all the blame. Kim says there's no benefit. He's just telling the truth and says that, if necessary, he'll personally take responsibility for his mistakes. The boss says the conference is scheduled for 9 in the morning. With such a serious accident, there's no way Kim can avoid disciplinary action, and since they're done, everyone is dismissed. So they leave the director's office, and Minju asks why Kim did that, because she saw him place the barrier with her own eyes, and knows he's doing it to protect the cleaning team. But she doesn't agree with that. She says that even without the barrier, a child couldn't easily get in, and there shouldn't have been a monster inside. since the dungeon had just been cleaned. It doesn't make sense and someone must be behind it. So she doesn't agree with Kim taking all the responsibility alone. The protagonist suspects this might really have been set up, but he asks if she has any way to catch the culprit and make them confess. He also says that whoever did this isn't someone ordinary, so there's no way to find the culprit before tomorrow's conference, and asks Minju to stay out of it. Kim knows this was definitely a setup, because a Vega monster shouldn't have appeared in that dungeon, and it was already nearly dead when it found the boy. But that's useless now after all. All he can think about is that he's about to unlock another skill, since the condition is to increase public interest in the cleaning team. Meanwhile, Minju thinks something isn't right. She thinks that even if someone removed the barrier by accident, how could a child have entered the dungeon 30 minutes before it disappeared? That doesn't make any sense. And besides, there was still a monster left in a dungeon that was supposedly already cleared. To her, this is definitely a conspiracy against her teacher and the cleaning team. Based on the situation, the culprit must be someone from within the association. But she can't do anything and can only watch. That leaves her extremely frustrated, until her team says they heard what happened, and also think something's wrong. They know Kim didn't do anything, and yet he's going to take all the blame. So they want to help find the real culprit, because Kim helped them before by defeating that monster, and now they want to return the favor. Minju realizes how determined her team is, so she says that all operations are suspended starting now, and the team will go after the real culprit. She also says that even if they fail to meet the monthly quota, they'll still continue with this mission, and if anyone disagrees they should speak up now. But no one in the team objects. Just as she's about to leave, she runs into someone. Deputy manager Leah Young introduces herself and says she's finally meeting Minju. A few hours earlier, Song Hyeon, crying, said that she had just started, and already such a big accident had happened. But Lee says it's not her fault and asks what the response plan is. Song says the janitor Kim will take full responsibility in front of the press. Lee is surprised and asks how someone connected to the president could make such a mistake. Song says that even though Kim is taking the blame, he wasn't responsible, so Lee asks if he's really going to take responsibility for a mistake he didn't make. She didn't think someone like that existed in the association. She wonders what Kim is trying to do, and whether he still has that kind of personality, even while being close to the president of the association. She also thinks that someone like that might actually be able to purge all the stagnant, rotten scum out of the association. So she tells Song Hyeon to keep this a secret, but suggests helping Kim in this situation. Back to the present, Lee tells Minju that she's here to help. She says she's been informed about the situation, and asks if Minju plans to investigate the truth about the accident. Minju says yes. Lee asks if she's made any progress. Minju says no, but plans to go to the location and try to get security footage. With that, Lee says she'll save her the trouble, because even being part of the association, Minju won't be able to access the security cameras. Not to mention the dungeon appeared in a more rundown area of the city, so there aren't any cameras nearby. Going there would be a waste of time. Fortunately, there were parked cars nearby at the time of the incident, and some of them might contain clues. Lee says she had Song Hyun track the cars down, since she said she saw a few of them when she went to make the restaurant reservation. So as soon as they locate them, they can access the cars using an official document. Minju thanks her for the help, but Lee says it's not free. However, Minju says she's been an operations leader for 3 days and doesn't have anything to offer in return. Lee then asks if Minju and Kim are close. She answers yes. Then Lee says there are rumors that Kim is a freelance hunter, possibly even directly connected to the president of the association. She wants to know if those rumors are true, but Minju says it's the first time she's heard of it. That information surprises Lee greatly. She says those rumors have been circulating at headquarters for weeks. Minju says she doesn't have many friends, so she didn't hear anything with that. Lee asks if Minju really thinks Kim is just a simple janitor, because judging by her reaction, Minju is clearly very naive. Thinking about that, Lee starts to laugh, because the idea of a janitor taking responsibility for something that wasn't his fault, and a team leader involving everyone just to help him, makes her think that maybe there are still people in the association who aren't rotten like the rest. So she says she'll help, and in return, she wants to meet Kim in person. Then the entire operations team celebrates. For his part, the protagonist has just left a clothing store. He bought something to wear at the conference, until he gets a call from So-yeon, who asks if Kim has spoken to Minju, since she hasn't been answering her calls lately. Kim says she's probably busy in some dungeon. But So-in says today is supposed to be Minju's day off. She says it might not be anything serious, but mentions that she received a concerning message from Minju. In it, Minju said she was going to save Kim and that if she was late, so Yemen should try to convince Kim not to go to the conference. She then asks if Kim knows what that's about. Instead of answering, the protagonist just says he has to hang up now. Right after that, he calls Minju, wanting to know what she's planning. Eventually she picks up and Kim asks what she's doing right now. She says she's heading to Taejun, and Kim asks why, since that district isn't her responsibility. Minju says she wants to collect proof that he's innocent, and that she's following leads, which is why she's going to Daejin. Kim reminds her that he told her to stay quiet and not get involved in this. But Minju said she can't just sit and watch her teacher in trouble. That was the last thing the protagonist wanted. But he knows Minju is stubborn and he won't be able to stop her, so he tells her to go ahead with her search. He thinks he can't let Minju find any proof, and it's better if she stays far from there until the conference is over. Minju tries to say something to Kim about the injured child, but he hangs up before she can. Right after that, Kim screams in anger in the middle of the street. This leaves the people around visibly scared. Kim hurts himself and by doing so enters battle mode. He did that specifically to activate his super speed skill, and he uses it to run after Minju because one way or another, he has to stop her from finding any evidence about what happened. Far from there, at the hospital where the child is, Lia Young introduces herself as an association employee, and she talks to a relative of the victim. The man says he has nothing to say to the association. Lee says that the cleaning team will issue a statement, but the case is still under investigation. But what happened wasn't their fault. Still, if this goes on, the cleaning team will be blamed for something they didn't do. But the man says that's great because to him, it's great if Kim Jong-woo is harmed in any way. Sometime later, in a parking lot in Taejun, a man is about to leave when Kim knocks on his window and startles him. The protagonist says he's from the association and asks for the man's cooperation. He asks what the association want. Kim simply grabs the vehicle's camera and destroys it. Then the man asks why he did that. Kim just says someone will come by later to compensate him. Right after that, he starts hurting himself on purpose again to enter battle mode. After that, he runs off again. Soon after, Minju arrives with her team and tells the car owner she's with the association and needs his help. But angry, the man says he wants nothing to do with the association anymore and threatens to sue them. Minju tries to calm him down, but one of her team members says this car also has its camera destroyed. So she realizes someone got to the first cars before them, and wonders just how far the responsible ones are willing to go with this. Back at the child's hospital, Lia, shocked by what she heard, she asks why this man wants to see Kim go down, and if he's following someone's orders. The man asks if a hunter still has to follow association orders, even after being fired. He says he didn't even get an apology for what happened to his brother, and instead someone from the association came to interrogate him. Lee says she's trying to help but annoyed. The man says that's just for appearances, and that he has nothing to say to the association. People around start whispering, having overheard the commotion, and with that, Lee thinks it's better to come back when no one else is around. Meanwhile, the man returns to the hospital room, and his brother asks if they can stop all this now, because the boy says staying at the hospital all day is suffocating, and he doesn't want to get more injections all day long. But the man says his brother promised to help him get revenge, and insists everything will be over tomorrow, so the boy needs to be more patient. However, someone appears saying they were thinking about letting it go, but fate has brought them together once again. The man sees that it is indeed Kim Jun-woo. Kim says that now everything makes sense. A frustrated former hunter used his knowledge to capture an almost dead monster, to expose his brother to a fake danger. All of it in the name of a ridiculous revenge, which only proves how low his character is. In turn, the boy, upon seeing Kim, realizes that the person his brother wants to get revenge on is the same one who saved him. The older brother says it's all Kim's fault, claiming it's hard for a provider to support his household after losing his job because of a janitor. But Kim replies that he wasn't the one who started the fight. Even so, he'll forgive him for everything. The protagonist thinks there's no need to cause a scene, since his skill will be unlocked. And in a weird way he can even thank this guy. So he leaves and tells the brothers not to do anything until tomorrow. He also says that holding a grudge against someone never results in anything good. Instead, he should take better care of his brother. After he leaves, the boy says that his brother was forgiven, and they don't need to continue with this. The next day, the entire press gets ready for the conference, and the protagonist is about to make his statement. He introduces himself as Kim Jong-woo, the janitor from the dungeon cleanup team, and begins by apologizing to the child who got hurt in the accident. He also says that it was a mistake not to place a barrier at the dungeon entrance, and that's why the accident happened, claiming full responsibility. With that, the protagonist thinks he did it, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop him now, because his goal of unlocking the skill will be achieved. But to his surprise, someone else steps forward to take the blame. Park, the leader of the cleanup team, says that he is the one truly responsible. Kim insists that he already explained the whole situation, so Park says that if that's the case, then Kim can leave now. He also says that Kim has helped him a lot, and now it's his turn to repay the favor. After that, Park introduces himself to everyone as the chief of the cleanup team, and since Kim is part of his team as the leader, all mistakes are his responsibility. The protagonist thinks that if he puts it that way, then there's no one in the team who isn't guilty, and that's exactly what he didn't want. Then Han and Seo Yun step forward and introduce themselves as members of the cleanup team, and Kim asks why they got involved too. They say that unlike Kim, they're veterans, and they also take responsibility for the mistakes of the newcomers. Kim wonders why there's always someone willing to get in his way, and he thinks that all his efforts so far to unlock the skill were in vain. Then a reporter asks if the accident was the responsibility of the entire cleanup team, but each of them claims individual responsibility, which leaves everyone confused, until Kim tells them to stop talking, and declares that the journalist must write that the blame lies solely and exclusively with Kim Jong-woo, because the others are not at fault. However, Minju shows up and says that the child hurt in the accident has something to say. The boy says he was just curious about the inside of a dungeon and moved the barrier by himself to go in. Because of that, he apologizes. Soon everyone starts questioning what really happened. Minju says that the cleanup team had nothing to do with the incident, and they placed the barrier just like they always do. The boy's brother says no one will believe that he did it all alone. Lee says kids are terrible liars. Not to mention that the boy emphasized he was alone, so he wouldn't get his brother in trouble. The older brother agrees that the boy has a good heart, unlike him who went too far out of revenge. He says he doesn't deserve a brother like that, and that's why he agrees to turn himself in. After that, the boy sees his brother approaching, and he remembers the day of their father's funeral, when his brother said he'd do his best to fill the old man's role. He quickly gets emotional and asks if his brother is going to prison. The older brother says he needs to be punished since he did something wrong. With that, the boy thinks his brother is going to prison because of him, but the older one says that's not it. He tells the boy to live well even if he's alone, and before he realizes his brother will be back. He also tells him to behave and obey his elders. Then the boy agrees and tells his brother to take care too. In turn, the protagonist realizes that the mission to unlock the skill failed, and he just wants this to be over. Already the protagonist unlocked abilities like Hyper Boost, and also the one called Hellfire. Even over immersion, all of them were easy to unlock, but the last time was different, because Kim thought he had failed. The moment the clean team decided to make a scene during his public confession, chaos ended up drawing more attention than the incident itself, and people didn't actually care about the child or anything like that. That became even more obvious when the topic blew up on social media, and many people commented. But the dominant topic was So Yun's beauty, which made the protagonist realize that the world is truly messed up. She had appeared live only once, and still managed to attract attention to the cleaning team, making Kim think he should thank her for unlocking his skill. After that, he goes to Minju's office and asks why she called him. Minju says she had mentioned earlier that someone wanted to meet him, and that's why she called him. Lee Ayoung introduces herself and says it's a pleasure to meet Kim. The protagonist immediately remembers Lee, his former assistant, but seeing her so cheerful and smiling, he wonders if this is really the same Lee Aoung he knew, compared to what she used to be, with her always downcast expression. It's hard to believe they're the same person. Kim thinks she's the only one who witnessed his death, and now her behavior is highly suspicious. But for now he figures the best thing to do is act natural. So he greets her, and Lee says she's heard a lot about Kim, and she admires his stance at the conference. But she says he's not as charismatic as she thought he'd be. Protagonist asks if he's supposed to be charismatic. Lee says yes, because that's what she would do, especially considering the discussion they're about to have. Getting straight to the point, Lee asks how far Kim wants to go. He's confused. She wants to know how far he plans to climb, but he says he has no idea what she's talking about. She then says that if Kim accepts her assistance, he could rise in rank and even become a director. For example, Lee says she'd love to see the headquarters turned upside down. The clean team couldn't even access the cafeteria when Kim wasn't with them. The support team, although in slightly better condition than the cleaning team, isn't much different. Both the cleaning and support teams have always been mistreated. But one day, a janitor appeared out of nowhere and started stirring things up, regardless of rank. That piqued her interest. Kim then asks as she's saying the support team will help, so he should become the director. Lee says that's not exactly how it's going to be, just that, if he's going to do something, he should go as far as he possibly can. Kim, those two things are the same, so Lee says he got the point right away. A tension between them becomes noticeable. Even to Minju, Lee says she doesn't know Kim's future plans, but she doesn't think he can do much if he stays in the cleaning team. So if he has more cards up his sleeve, he could go much further. Minju apologizes for interrupting, but asks if it's really acceptable for the vice manager to decide something like this on her own. Lee says she has that authority. Minju then asks how much help the support team can really offer. She replies that the support team can provide many things, crafted weapons, specific support, and much more. But these benefits would be more useful for convincing the operations team than the cleaning team. Kim thinks there's a reason this woman can be so confident, even without being the department manager. It's because her father is a member of the board of directors. He's one of the few senior executives in the association who truly knows how to run the organization. And Lee also managed to reach the position of manager. Since returning, she's just a deputy manager now. But the two of them formed a very powerful connection within the association. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. In the past, Lee was fired from her position while they were renovating the Seoul headquarters. She likely had a falling out with her superiors and lost her influence until she became the protagonist's personal assistant. It was probably then that her personality changed and she became robotic. Kim wonders if her proposal is actually part of Executive Director Dusuk's plan, because if he makes the mistake of cooperating with her, once Executive Director Dusuk is removed from power, both the cleaning team and operations team too might disappear without a trace. Then the protagonist makes up his mind. He thanks for the offer but ends up refusing. Lee asks why and questions if there's no condition under which he would accept, because she was just saying that Kim should keep doing what he's been doing so far. The protagonist says that for that he doesn't need help. So Lee asks if he's really that confident, or if he just didn't like her for some reason. Kim doesn't think Lee is responsible for his death in his past life, but he also doesn't think he can fully trust her. He says both options are wrong. Turning the headquarters upside down or climbing the ranks. After all, he never had such grand ambitions to begin with, and now he needs to go since there's still cleaning to do. Sometime later, the protagonist joins the cleanup team. Park says they're about to start, but the protagonist points out that Han hasn't arrived yet. The chief says he forgot to mention, but Han won't be working today because his sister is returning to Korea after a long time, and he went to meet her. His sister is a hunter from the International Association, and she's coming back to Korea for a specific job, but Park doesn't know the details. Kim thinks it's quite unusual to have an international hunter and a janitor in the same family. In any case, he says that with only 3 of them, the work will be harder, but Park encourages the team, saying they just need to work hard like they always do. However, today, they have the company of a reporter who is following the daily routine of the cleanup team and recording everything until the group gets uncomfortable with his presence and asks what his real purpose is. He introduces himself as Gu Sang-chan from Central News Daily and says he's just covering the cleanup team. Kim asks why he wasn't informed of this beforehand. The reporter says that the headquarters itself authorized him to work with them, so he assumed he had permission to be there. But Kim still asks what his real interest in the cleanup team is. Goose says that after the conference, people's interest in the cleanup team grew, and due to that curiosity, the newspaper wants to publish a story about them. He also says that many rumors circulate about the cleanup team and their privileges, but most people don't really know what the team does, and this is the perfect opportunity to show the public how special the cleanup team is. Still, Gu was advised not to do this, yet he decided to cover them anyway. So Yen says she thinks this could be positive for them, because after reading about the cleanup team, maybe more people will join in the future. Park, on the other hand, says this isn't the kind of job people usually look for, and he fears this could worsen the public's perception. The protagonist is left with a question, and asks if publishing an article about a job opening would also increase interest in that position. Goose says yes, but usually it's not a good thing, because people tend to belittle the work and say, anyone could do it, but he'll do his best to prevent that from happening. However, the protagonist tells him to write an article, saying that working in the cleanup crew is the easiest thing in the world. That's exactly what you wanted, because he says that after the article is published, even high school students will want to work on the cleanup team. Meanwhile, the protagonist thinks he'll make lemonade out of lemons, since that article will help unlock another one of his skills. Shortly after, Soo-young asks if the director really allowed a reporter to cover the cleanup team, because if a good article is published, it would boost their morale. The director says that won't happen, going into a dungeon full of gas to cut up monster carcasses, and ending up covered in who knows what's blood. A reporter can't write about a job like that. Soo-young says that as expected from the director, the mistake was his for not seeing the big picture. He also thinks this is a good opportunity for those cleanup bastards to learn their place until he realizes something, and wonders if he even told the cleanup team that a reporter would be covering them today. Back in the dungeon, the reporter says the cleanup work seems never-ending, and asks how long Kim has been on the team, because he thought Kim was someone with no experience at all. But seeing him work, he was positively surprised. However, the protagonist doesn't like this at all. He's really irritated by all the questions, and just wants it to be over soon. Then they come across a giant fallen monster. Even though he was dead, that was enough to scare the reporter, and irritate the protagonist even more. Kim, however, says this is the best part of his job, and states that Gu has no idea how fun it is to dismantle someone. He asks if the reporter wants to give it a try. Then he explains step by step how to perform the procedure. The protagonist's intention was precisely to scare him, and it couldn't have worked out better, because now Gu realizes how terrifying this job really is, and even faints from fear, alarming the rest of the team, except for Kim, since that was exactly what he wanted. Sometime later, Gu writes that even with fewer staff, they finish the job in 2 hours, and normally clean 3 to 4 dungeons per day. He says that during this time, they don't even have access to a cafeteria or anything like that, and then asks if even so they think this job is worth it. Protagonist tries to come up with a quick answer that will benefit the article and not damage the image of the cleaning team, until Park remembers that today is payday, and asks if Kim hasn't received his first paycheck yet. With that, Kim sees something he can use, because he thinks that if there's nothing attractive about the job, then it all comes down to money. Even if the job is crap, as long as a lot of money is offered, people will still be interested. There's also the bonus from the previous joint project, so he's eager to see how much he earned, until he sees that he worked 300 hours that month, and earned a measly 3 million won, and that's with the bonus already included, meaning it's 100 times less than what he earned as a hunter. Park says they work hard for that paycheck, and that they actually made a lot this month, since the bonus was applied. Kim realizes that just like him, the reporter also came to the conclusion that this amount doesn't justify the work. At this rate, an article will ruin the cleaner's reputation, and for years no one will consider doing this job. So Kim decides to lie and says they only sent half the payment. After all, the team gets paid twice a month. Goose says that now it makes sense. How can anyone receive a monthly salary like that for all the work they do? Then he concludes that the real salary is much higher, and that's more than you can earn at most major companies. So the job draws interest even if it's hard. Kim's team asks what he's talking about, because if new recruits find out it's a lie, it won't take long before the cleaning team's reputation falls apart. Even so, Kim insists on a lie and says, "This isn't a prank at the association building." The director says he's keeping his hands off the cleaning team, and is furious that Kim is untouchable, and he can't do anything against him. He also says there's no reason for Kim's behavior, and asks why he do these things just for the cleaning team, if they have nothing to offer. In any case, he says it's best to stay as far from Kim as possible, and that he doesn't want to see his face anytime soon. But to his dismay, Kim shows up unannounced in the director's office, and the director asks what the problem is. This time, the protagonist asks for a raise. The director says that Kim has only been a janitor for a month, and his contract hasn't even been validated yet. But out of curiosity, he asks how much of a raise. Kim says he wants double. SEO Mim Chil asks first why he wants a raise, because for a temporary employee, he doesn't think the current salary is that low. The protagonist says it's not so bad if you look only at the amount, but it doesn't match the level of difficulty of the work. Then, the director says that Kim will get the raise if it's only for him, but the protagonist says it's not just for him. He wants the salary of the entire team to be double. Seo Min Chil says that Kim must really hate him, because in the entire corporation, no one has ever asked for a salary increase to double the amount, much less for the whole team. And to think they're not even talking about a specialized job. He apologizes but says that's a matter beyond his authority, and it's something only the board of directors can decide. The director knows Kim is trying to trick him somehow, but swears that this is not something he can do. Ken realizes he asked too soon, thinking it would be a good chance to unlock two of his skills at once, but he was way too hasty right after that. Another executive enters the room. He starts talking about this round's operations distribution, and says it's obvious that C and Chill is favoring Team 1, because he had been thinking the same, until he notices that C Manchil is already receiving another visitor. Kim says he was just leaving and will let them talk, and Shu Min Chiu thinks that Kim has no idea. He's standing in front of the executive director of the association. Before the protagonist leaves, the executive director asks to take a picture with him. He says he's a big fan, because he knows he's Kim Jun-woo from the cleanup team, and says that must be how his daughter feels when following her favorite idols. Kim knows exactly who this man is. After all, he is Lee Do-shik, one of the most influential figures in the association, and the father of Lee Ah-young. He thinks the father still doesn't know that he and his daughter know each other, and beyond that, the fact that Lee Ah-young follows idols catches Kim by surprise. The protagonist decides to fish for some info, and asks what the executive director knows about him. Do-shik says there's no one who doesn't know him, because his feats have become famous. He also says there were even rumors that Kim was a spy, and some say he has strong connections within the association, which is why he always gets what he wants. But in the end, he asks why Kim decided to visit Seo Min Cheol. Kim says he came to request a salary raise. Do-shik says that Min Cheol doesn't have the authority for that, but he does. And he also says that everyone knows janitors' salaries aren't great. Kim then asks if he'd be willing to approve the raise. Do-shik says he can't guarantee it, as he can't decide that alone. With that, the protagonist realizes that Do-shik wants something from him. The executive director says that right now, it's the monthly payout period for the operations teams, and the dungeon information provided by the control team has surpassed 100 pages. Min Cheol is making it far too easy for Su Yen to perform well. Then he asks if the captain of Operations Team 2 is aligned with Kim's faction. Protagonist asks what he's talking about. He's just a janitor. Do-shik says that in any case, Kim must prove why he deserves a raise, so that he can justify the proposal to the board of directors. He wants Kim to work together with Ninju's team, to outperform Soo-young's team, believing that this will be easy for Kim, and if he succeeds, he'll be able to use that to bring the request to the board, and finally secure a raise for the entire cleanup team. The protagonist thinks things are escalating for some reason. A few days later, he gathers the cleanup team along with Minju's team, and she asks why her teacher gathered. Everyone says it's nothing major, but declares that this time Operations Team 2, together with Cleanup Team 3, will take the number 1 spot in results. Kim asks how the preparations for Operations Team 2 are going. Minju says they're rushing to hit the target. Min Cheol is openly supporting Team 1, and she heard Team 3 hired freelance hunters. The protagonist says he wants them to progress more this time, and he's going to help, and of course, he has a plan personally. He thinks it's worth trying against a team of traitors, and a mediocre one. He believes Minju's team can shake off that kind of treatment, and asks if they're in or not. Minju says that if her teacher believes, then she believes too. The team members also agree and say they can't turn down his help. Kin says that the cleanup team isn't irrelevant during payout season. Just cleaning a lot of dungeons isn't the point, but cleaning systematically is. This is an operation that requires perfect coordination between the operations team and the cleanup team. Minju agrees to cooperate. The protagonist says that actually, there's another team involved besides them. Lee Aoung shows up and says that he cruelly rejected her offer, now calls her when he needs something. She also says that Kim has no idea how upset she was, and if it were anyone else, they wouldn't even give him a second chance. She claims you can't catch a bus that's already left, and warns that she tends to hold grudges against people who hurt her. The protagonist thinks that just the two teams wouldn't be enough for this mission, which is why he requested Lee Young's help. In turn, Lee says she'll set this conversation aside and asks what Kim needs. Kim explains that if other teams fall behind, it'll be the chance to move forward at full force. He'll use A+ items support every 2 days and centralized command. Lee asks why he needs so many things, saying he doesn't have to go that far, and that it won't be that hard for the team to safely secure a stable rank. But Kim says he's not doing all this just to reach some insignificant benchmark or anything like that. He also mentions that nepotistic team captain who doesn't even know what the 0 in operations stands for, or that idiot who only knows how to talk and thinks that the number of people is all that matters. So he has no intention of losing to any of them. His goal is to take first place. Lee says that this time, the control team provided most of the information, and even if they cooperate, there would still be a big gap in the amount of information. Both teams have. Kim tells her not to worry about that, because his instincts say this will be good. And if he's not mistaken, the next dungeon will open soon. Then Gu Sang-chan shows up and apologizes for the interruption, but says he has something to ask. He asks if the cleaning team usually takes the lead when it comes to joint operations. On this scale, Kim says, probably not. Then everyone hears a strange noise coming from outside, and they think it might be the dungeon that just appeared. Right away, the protagonist says it's time to act, and tells Lee to carry out all the preparations. She then heads to the monitoring room, and tells them to maximize all the cameras in the area. After that, she asks how weapon production is going. One of the staff says they don't have enough materials, and it'll take some time to make everything. Lee says they can't fall behind the other teams, and asks if he's already talked to the materials department. The staffer says yes, but they said they're out of stock. So Lee says they'll have to find a way to fix that immediately. Song Hai-yen notices the tension and asks if everything is okay. Lee says she's seen low-ranking employees being casually tossed around the headquarters many times, and she takes full responsibility, then says for them to keep going. She can't miss the chance to ruin Min-chil and Su-young. Now inside the dungeon that just opened, some bone-based monsters attack, and Minju takes the front line in battle. As a swordswoman, she attacks the enemies with support from her team. Kim says these skeletons are just as tough as the giant stone ogre she fought last time, so she should use a one-shot KO skill. He also says the monster's weak point is the spine joints at the back of the neck. It'll be easier if they focus their attacks there. The protagonist says he'll handle the big one, and they should take care of the rest. So Minju tells them to use the attack formation they've been practicing with, that one of them charges in and clears a path for the others. Then she calls out to the team captain. Minju uses the momentum and manages to leap over the enemies. The rear team takes the chance to fire from a distance, and the support team also gets to work, activating buffs for the whole team. After that, Minju ends up face to face with the monster, and after activating her attack skill, she gets close to the giant's neck and lands a fatal blow, cutting off its head. Kim sees that they did an amazing job as a team, and wonders when Minju grew up this much. For a brief moment, he gets distracted and the monster's hand falls toward him. When she sees her teacher in danger, Minju panics, but then she realizes Kim wasn't hit and feels relieved. The protagonist sees a sword on the ground and takes the opportunity to grab it for himself. He also activates one of his skills, which increases combat effectiveness. The monster rises again and tries to strike him, doesn't know who it's dealing with. Kim, on the other hand, knows exactly what he's doing, and with just one strike, he defeats the enemy. After that, He sees Park approaching. The cleaning team leader's boss says it's their turn to act now, and he shows up piloting a drone. Naturally, Kim thinks he didn't need such a dramatic entrance. Next, he tests a new cutter and asks if they can keep it, claiming that with one of those, they could clear 10 dungeons a day easily. Kim says that's going to be difficult, since he heard it was imported from abroad at a high price to be used in weapon production. Lee says the next route will be SEO Codon, where another dungeon is expected to appear, and she has already sent the equipment and support teams there. Kim hears this and says that at this pace, getting first place won't be a problem. Sometime later, the team ranking table is updated, and Soo-young is furious when he sees he's losing to Kim. Staff member updates the number of completed dungeons, and says, the gap between the two teams will definitely keep increasing, and if this continues, Team 2 will have a big advantage over Team 1, which makes Min Chil furious, thinking, this is Kim's way of protesting the refusal of his salary raise. Meanwhile, Operations Team 1 is also working, and Soo-yeon monitors them closely, because he knows if he doesn't do his job properly, he'll have problems with the director. Alongside him is Cleanup Team 1, and Soo-yen rushes them on the other side. Operations Team 2 along with Cleanup Team 3 are working in cooperation under the leadership of the protagonist, and thanks to that, they're able to fight the monsters with more strategy. Kim says they're on a tight schedule, but Park assures him they'll finish the job on time. Meanwhile, Operations Team 3 has hired freelance hunters, but the protagonist team is still in the lead, which irritates Min Chil even more. To make things worse, the director's assistant says that Kim also has support from the support team, something that leaves the director very surprised. With that, Min Chil suspects that Do Shik is involved in this operation, and may be dissatisfied with how Team 1 is getting all the resources, but he doubts that Do Shik is the type to sabotage the association's main representative team. His assistant says that if they also manage to bring the control team to their side, this alliance could be considered a division, capable of clearing dungeons on its own. After that, Min Chil asks the captain if he's also going to join the cleanup team. His name is Pyun Chong-hyun, member of the command and captain of the control team, and he replies that there's no way he can do that. Then Min Chil tells the captain to stop giving dungeons to the cleanup team, and he doesn't want Operations Team 2 to have further authorization to operate. Sometime later, Minju says she finished another dungeon, and asks if they should keep going. Kim says no because they've been cleaning 5 dungeons a day, and they need to save their strength for the final push. The protagonist asks if the reporter still thinks their job is easy, since the disassembly is done with a cutting machine, and disinfection is handled by a drone. But Gu asks if all that comes for free, and says that was part of Kim's plan to acquire. Plus, the borrowed equipment still has to be returned at the end. Even so, Kim says the cleanup teams truly need new staff, and asks Gu for help with that. Then, Lee calls over the radio saying there's something urgent to report, and announces that effective immediately, all pending dungeon cleaning operations have been handed over to Operations Team 1. With that, the protagonist realizes the control team has joined Nin Chiu, and sees that he really is persistent. Lee says that now the number of dungeons for Team 1 has tripled, making it easier for them to clear more dungeons than the other teams. Team 1 is currently 3 dungeons ahead of the protagonist's team, and that gap is only expected to grow. Kim wonders if they don't realize the loss will be theirs when a dirty dungeon reappears, but concludes that it's no longer his concern, and says that, after Operations, it's his cleanup team who has to clean everything. Not only that, if they don't get first place this time, there won't be a salary raise, and it'll be hard to expect a good article to be published. There's too much at stake to just give up on this operation. Team 1 will eventually reach their limit anyway, so Kim thinks that if they make one last push, they'll be able to catch up. The problem is that meanwhile, dungeons are being cleaned. But even with protective gear, there's no way to survive the poisonous gas inside a dirty dungeon. Besides, if this keeps happening, the order of dungeon cleanup before disinfection might be reversed. The cleaners would have to enter dungeons with live monsters. Probably wouldn't be a problem for him, but the other team members could be in serious danger. So the protagonist calls the support team on the radio to say what he's thinking. Meanwhile, at the Uedo Supernatural and Dimensional Management Association, Do Shik becomes furious upon learning that all the dungeons in Seoul were already claimed by Min Chil. He says that the people at headquarters are making a mistake, because if the dungeons aren't evenly divided between the teams, they won't be properly cleaned. So he tells his secretary to contact the control team captain immediately, until his daughter suddenly appears and says that won't be necessary. Du-shik reminds his daughter that he told her not to visit his office during work hours. Lee says she's not there as his daughter, because she wants to talk about work. In that case, Du-shik says she should treat her superiors with more respect. But Lee laughs at the situation, and asks if he really wants to talk about manners at such a critical time either way. She says there's no need to cancel the operation over a setback. Du-shik asks how they could continue without any dungeons to operate on. Lee says that everyone from Operation Team 2 is helping the cleaning team. Both teams are supporting each other. Being honest, she says she doesn't fully understand the situation, and she's just following the leader of the operation. Her father asks what she means. She's referring to Kim, and says he sent a message saying he admits defeat this time. Lee asks when her father met Kim again, and says she feels left out every time they meet without her. After that, she says she has to go, as she doesn't have much free time, since there are some things that need to be cleaned. With that, Du-shik starts laughing, because he thinks that the fact Kim admitted defeat only means he has something bigger in mind for the future, and he's also surprised that he managed to get an operations team to help with cleaning, as that shows those people are obedient to Kim. Then he tells his secretary to contact the association president and prepare the disciplinary committee. Du-shik leaves, and as he walks, he thinks that Min-chil lost to the cleaning team this time too. Speaking of him, Min-chil asks if they should stop the operation now. He also asks what to do in case this gets out. One of his secretaries replies that not only the other teams, but even the directors will likely make a huge fuss, since the moment they granted exclusive authority to clear dungeons, all the other teams became their enemies. Not only that, but since the situation got out of hand, it's too late to fix it now. Then one of them shows up saying there's no need to halt the operation, because Operation Team 2 and the support team are helping with the cleaning. One of the secretaries wonders why Operation Team 2 stopped fighting and started cleaning. Not to mention that the support team is led by Du-shik's daughter. The other secretary says that's good for them, because if Operation Team 2 stopped, that means Team 1 remains in the lead until the end. But their boss says that's not good, because now they've lost any chance to correct this mistake. And Min-chil says that now they're completely lost. Back at the dungeon cleanup, everyone's got their hands full, but Lee, who doesn't have experience with this, struggles to dismember the monsters, until Minju shows up and gives her some tips on how to do it. After all, she's been through it herself before. But upon seeing Minju's skills in this task, Lee asks how a team leader from operations knows so much about clinging and dismembering monsters. Minju replies that she used to work with the cleaning team. Lee says that's another activity they did without her, but Minju says that was before they even met. Then Lee says she was just joking, which makes Minju find her a bit eccentric. The protagonist arrives to interrupt and says they don't have much time before the dungeon closes. A short time later, they prepare to leave, and Minju thanks everyone for their work. Then she asks her teacher if something is bothering him. Kim says he mentioned before that she would end up in first place in the rankings, but at the pace they're going, that result seems hard to reach, and he feels like he's just making everyone suffer in vain with that. Minju says she didn't expect her teacher to care so much about that, and tells him not to worry, because even if he decides to go ahead with the plan, they won't be able to anyway. And besides, if the only goal for everyone was to reach first place, none of them would have taken even a single step toward joining the cleaning team. When they were invited, Kim says that no one seems to have their head in the right place. Minju asks if the results were really that bad. The protagonist says they'll need for whole days just to catch up. Minju says they still have 3 more weeks, so it shouldn't be that hard. Lee says it seems like they're working overtime, and even though the team still has plenty of energy, she suggests they take a break and eat something first. However, as soon as they leave the dungeon, they run into Du-shik, who apologizes for arriving late, but says the agreement for the teams is already over. He also says that even though things escalated due to people blinded by their desire to achieve results, he can't allow any more operations from this point forward, and the control team has already canceled all ongoing operations. With the operation over, Operations Team 2 ended up in second place in the rankings, behind Operations Team 1. The whole team celebrates because for them second place is great. But unlike them, Kim doesn't like the result, because this means he won't be able to unlock his ability. Do-shik tells Kim not to be upset because even if he didn't win, this is still an achievement for everyone in his group. In any case, Yushik is thankful, since a serious problem could have occurred if not for Kim, and he plans to severely hold Ninchil accountable. Furthermore, there's something else he wants to say, so he tells Kim that if he has time, he should meet him later in his office. The protagonist thinks it's obvious. Do-shik must want to talk about the headquarters renovation, just like in his past life, and he definitely doesn't want to go. Meanwhile, Park thanks everyone on the team for their great work. Lee says that if everyone agrees, she wants to take them somewhere to eat. Park and So-yun insist that Kim go with them, since they know he always declines. But this time, they want him to join since he was the one who organized everything. With so much insistence, the protagonist agrees to go with them. However, it didn't take long for him to regret it. A disciplinary committee meeting was held at the headquarters. About the incident, the team captain, Suyong, argued that he carried out the dungeon cleanings, but claimed he didn't know all the resources were being concentrated on Team 1. No one knows if they accepted that excuse, but he was let off with just a warning. Minchil's justification was even more ridiculous, as he claimed he allowed Team 1 to monopolize the resources because they are an elite team. Unlike the others, a salary cut was given to Minchil as punishment. It seems even an executive director like Do-shik can be quite direct. And finally, the captain of the control team was also reprimanded. For some reason, he even personally apologized to Kim. Either way, that's how the incident ended this time. After all that, the protagonist was called in for a conversation. Lee says that even though it's embarrassing, she'll be blunt, and tells Kim that the price for helping him still hasn't been paid. He says he thought Lee helped out of pure kindness, and didn't know she was so materialistic. Lee gets irritated by this provocation and says they had an agreement, so the protagonist asks if this has something to do with executive director. Do-shik Lee says no, that this is only between her and him. Kim says it's good to hear that. Then she asks if Kim already knew that Do-shik is her father. He replies that he heard about it at the celebration dinner. In any case, she says that after the last operation, Cleanup Team 3 is attracting a lot more attention at headquarters than before. Kim says he's not surprised, since he figured something like that would happen, especially because Operations Team 2 was involved. But Lee says that's not quite it because the attention isn't negative. Everyone has seen Clean Up Team 3 as something to envy. She says it's due to the results shown during the last operation. Even though they came in second place, it was enough to earn praise. Not to mention that both Minju's team and Lee's team helped with the cleaning, and that shocked some people, since usually they only care about result. Lee says this was a big move on Kim's part, and she thinks now he's going to aim for first place. Kim asks if that has to do with their agreement. She replies that a new cleanup team has been created, and she believes the association is finally recognizing the importance of dungeon cleaning work, and people are being considered to lead that team. And Lee says that as payment for helping him, she wants Kim to be appointed leader of the new cleaning team that's being formed. Kim asks if she has the authority to do that. Lee replies that yes, she does. Not only that, but she says that from now on, Kim will be promoted to captain of his own cleaning team. Protagonist asks how someone who's only worked for 2 months can be promoted like that. Besides, if he leaves Park's team, they'll be left with 2 major gaps. Lee says it's funny to hear that coming from him, and explains that this personnel reorganization created a position for a cleaning section chief, and Park will be promoted to that role. Kim thinks that even the operations teams don't have a section chief, and now the cleaning teams will, so he assumes this is Do-shik's doing. Lee says the original plan was for Kim to take the section chief role, but she knew he would refuse, so she didn't bother asking him beforehand. Being honest, Kim thinks the proposal to lead his own cleaning team isn't that bad. It might even help with his goals, but it could also bring him even more problems. He asks what hiring new employees has to do with Lee. She says nothing, but since someone had to fill the position, she figured it would be better if someone interesting took the role, because a genius recognizes another genius. That's why Ken was chosen. She also says he should start looking for the most suitable people around him. He can scout in private guilds or persuade people on the streets. The protagonist says there's no need for that, because a lot of new recruits will be arriving. Soon Lee doesn't understand and asks how. He says a reporter covered the cleaning team's work and asked him to write an article that would get people interested in working in the field. But Lee says that article is already out and asks if he hasn't read it yet. Kim says no because the reporter said he would call before publishing. But when he sees the article, he becomes furious and asks what the hell he's reading. The article says that cleaning dungeons, so they can be cleared without issue, is the main job of the dungeon cleaning team. Cleaning team cuts up monster carcasses daily and clears other debris. During this process they are exposed to dangerous or poisonous gases. On top of that, they are few in number. Their jobs are highly complex and their work hours are terrible. Just from looking at it, what they do could be considered a typical dirty, difficult, and dangerous job. However, after observing the cleaning team closely, it was found that their work goes beyond that. While it's normal for other cleaning teams to be overwhelmed, during the operational team settlement season, Kim from Cleaning Team 3 planned an LED a joint operation. The cleaning team is not just a team that cleans dungeons. It also coordinates the work of all teams, which leads to efficient and stable operations. The core of the association, the planning team, that's why they require higher skills and better capabilities. Compared to other teams, even though the salary is very low, can be said that the clean team is the front line of the association. Kim is someone to watch, as he's expected to achieve even more in the future. A true leader of this generation. After reading it, the furious protagonist sends a message to the reporter, demanding an explanation for the article, but Gu replies only with an emoji. Lee asks what he thought of it, and says that people's reactions are also pretty wild. As expected, the cleaning teams are now seen as the most important. They're not some kind of special operations team, or at least that's what people are saying. It seems that the common misconception that it's just a cleaning job, and therefore unimportant, has shifted a bit. Lee check just in case. But no one has applied for the cleaning team yet, since the article says excellent skills and good performance are required, combined with the fact that it mentions the low salary. After reading the article, she thinks no one would be interested in applying. Furious, the protagonist says it's all Gu Sang-chan's fault. Sometime later, Soo-young hears that Kim is about to be promoted, and asks the director if it's true. Minchio says yes, and that, in addition, a new position will be created. So Soo-young understands that Do-shik is behind this. The director agrees and says that's the least of their problems, because with Kim taking this new position, he'll have more authority to carry out his actions. He also says that if there's an exception to that, it would be the new Clean-up Team 6. That said, this time he wants to imitate Clean-up Team 3, because the position of team captain should belong to someone on his side, someone more capable than Kim Jun-woo. Just as Kim expanded his influence by supporting Ninju, Min Chil also wants to create his own cleanup team to expand his influence, and he wants to get on this train by using a cleanup coin. Soo-young reminds him that he said he wouldn't get involved with the cleanup team anymore. Min Chil says he's just bringing a capable person into the new team, since even executive directors Stong Chil-shik and Go Eun-young have their eyes on that new position. They also have a similar goal in mind, and have probably already contacted private guilds in search of suitable talent they can use. So Yang thinks expanding the sphere of influence to the cleanup team, something no one even paid attention to before, isn't exactly wrong either. Operations Team 2, the support team, and even the control team, are about to join forces with the cleanup teams, so division immune to HQ influence could soon be created. But Soo-young thinks that if someone from their side joins the new team, HQ's influence could be restored. In other words, whoever takes over as captain of Cleanup Team 6 will determine who holds the key power in HQ. From now on, Min Chil interrupts his thoughts and tells him to look for freelance hunters in Jeonggi-do, and says he'll take care of the rest himself. Soo-young asks if the candidates need to meet any criteria. His boss says he should look for someone with a high rank and a lot of dungeon cleaning experience. Then Soo-young asks what they should do about Kim, since he'll definitely be interested in the new team. Min Chil says it'll be fine as long as they find someone more capable. Whoever they hire can be just as amazing as Kim, leaving everyone else aside. He says he can't afford to lose, not even in these personal connection battles. After his boss leaves, Soo-young sees a cigarette box on the floor and finds it strange, since he thought Min Chil had quit smoking years ago. Back to the protagonist. He says it's been a while since the settlement season ended, and he enjoys being able to relax a little. Minju wonders why he's resting there, and guesses her teacher probably doesn't have many friends. Then Kim checks his phone and sees that becoming a team leader, just 2 months after starting the job, he's bound to be hated by a lot of people. Minju says that makes sense. Even being a team captain, it's hard for her to believe her teacher is just a regular staff member. The protagonist says that's just her opinion. But meanwhile, organizations don't work that way. With that, Minju asks how the selection of members for the new team is going. Kim says he hasn't started looking yet. Kim says he doesn't know how to choose people, since it's not like he knows anyone nearby who's fit for the job. That just reinforces Minju's idea that he has no friends. He thinks that since a new team is being formed, the spots will naturally get filled, and when that happens the unlock condition will be met. Minju asks that if Kim had to personally choose someone, what criteria would he use? The protagonist says he's thinking of someone who's obedient and has a good personality. That surprises Minju. Kim asks what kind of person she choose. Minju says it would be nice if it could be someone like her teacher, who has a strong sense of justice and takes good care of his teammates. Kim tells her she needs to hang out with more people until someone shows up and apologizes for interrupting, but says he needs to talk to Kim. The protagonist asks who this man is. He introduces himself as Pyeong Chong Hyun, captain of the control team. Kim knows that Hyun is someone on the way to joining Min Shil's faction. In other words, after the recent disciplinary committee, he's a pitiful guy who ended up taking a loss after aligning with that side. Kim then asks what brings him here. Hyun in turn says he'll be direct and starts talking about the new cleanup team, claiming that Kim definitely needs to take hold of it because Min Shil, Yoon Young Chil Shik, and many others are determined to put someone from their own side in that new team. She also says she's going to help him because she can't stand working alongside those people anymore, especially now that there's a lot of interest in the cleaning team. From HQ, a team that couldn't be controlled, one you couldn't be near without proper justification, has now become the top priority to be acquired. The protagonist understands that the big shots are willing to fight each other over the new team. Hyun confirms that and insists that Kim must not let any of them win. Kim wonders why someone like that would join a cleaning team instead of an operations team, and thinks they're looking for someone to replace him. Hyun says he should start preparing, and hands over a list containing hunters from well-known guilds, an ex-captain stating he'll do his best to support him after that. Kim says this is all evolving too quickly, and asks if Hyun is asking him to pick someone from this list to stand by his side. The captain confirms it, saying that even if Kim is promoted, if he's not careful he might get pushed down by the new cleaning team. Kim doesn't seem concerned, and asks since when there's been this worry about the cleaning team becoming influential. Hyun says the more teams he has, the more attention he'll attract. But Kim replies that he's fine the way he is now, and doesn't want more responsibilities. Still trying to convince him, Hyun says everyone would love for Kim to be directly involved with this team. Kim says that has nothing to do with him. However, thinking it over, he admits it really is a very tempting offer. With that, Hyun gets super excited and says he'll take care of the preparations. The protagonist only accepted the offer because his system alerted him that, by doing so, he would unlock another one of his abilities, and he's eager for that. Elsewhere far from there, Han Sang-hyuk arrives home and because of the smell, says it reeks like a garbage dump. His sister says she's offended by that comment, so he asks when the last time was that she took a shower. He also says she got fired in the US, so she should go out and find another job, and since she's home all day, she should at least clean the place. She in turn says there's an interesting article about her brother's team, saying that a cleaning team involved in a joint operation is getting a lot of attention. Han then asks if his sister is planning to join the cleaning team. Her name is Han Yubin, and she asks, what's the problem after all? It was her own brother who told her to find a job. Back to the protagonist. He thinks that to fulfill the conditions and unlock the next skill, it'll be pretty simple: adjust the workload according to the salary, and also provide a good work environment. The problem is that the cleaning team satisfies neither of those two, and yet they're already at 18%. Kim wonders just how naive these people are. The workload will decrease as soon as the new team is formed. The real issue is creating a good work environment. To build a good work environment, someone needs to have deep knowledge and good understanding of the cleaning team. The new team needs someone like that, like Manager Park, but the first candidate he interviews appears to be the complete opposite of what the protagonist is looking for. The candidate says he knows a bit about the association's current situation, and apparently there's a new cleaning team that needs fresh members. He also says he's not in any guild at the moment, and is basically unemployed, so he doesn't mind doing the job as a favor. Kim, however, says that just because he invited him doesn't mean he's been accepted, but if he's asking for a favor, Kim is willing to recommend him. He also says that right now, he's looking for people to join a cleaning team, and ranks don't matter, because you don't need that kind of thing to clean dungeons at that. The candidate becomes furious and says he's Shin Top 1, so there's no way Kim has never heard of him. Angrily, Won says that Kim is acting arrogant now, just because he got a bit famous in the association. He says Kim will regret this because they'll see each other again. Kim says he doesn't even need to worry about that. He's already regretting it, then asks who he thinks he's looking down on when he's just a rank hunter. The protagonist thinks those other candidates from previous meetings were the same. They say they're successful hunters, so it's special for them to be joining the cleaning team. But in reality, they're just bumpkins who think they're competent. It's obvious what will happen if those guys join the cleanup team. So Kim wonders why Captain Payan gave him a list with that kind of people, until Lee Ioung calls him and says Kim really worked hard this time, and she's very happy to have trusted him with this. Kim asks what she's talking about. Lee says she asked Kim to find someone interesting, and a woman named Han Yubin is already waiting. Then Lee tells him to hurry and head to headquarters as soon as he arrives. Han Yubin introduces herself. However, the protagonist finds it strange since they haven't met yet. Lee asks where he found this girl. Kim doesn't know since he wasn't the one who found her. In turn, Yubin says Kim isn't as charismatic as she imagined. He apologizes for that, but says they'll proceed with the interview. Then he asks why a former international hunter is applying for the clean-up team. Yubin says there's no real difference when it comes to skill level. Kim says that if they're talking about levels, then operations teams or private guilds would be more suited for her. But Yubin says she's already been disqualified as a hunter. Yubin says she doesn't know any other job, and since she can't be a hunter, she wants this job because it's similar to what she used to do. But she thinks maybe Kim isn't looking for someone anymore. He says that's not it, but asks if she knows what a cleanup team actually does. Yubin hesitates at the question and asks if she's disqualified. Kim says no, he's just curious about her knowledge. Then Yubin explains that in the US, the role of cleanup teams is to clean up product waste in dungeons. But the Korean cleanup team coordinates special projects and supervises operations in general. Additionally, they also handle the overall planning and command of operations. Her enthusiasm leaves the protagonist rather unsettled. Just to be safe, Kim masks as she came to the interview after reading the article. Yubin responds yes. Then Kim apologizes, but says the cleanup team isn't as grand as it seems. It's the same as the US teams, just a team that cleans dungeons. Yubin says as she suspected. The system is similar. The protagonist asks what she means. Yubin says she heard similar words when she first joined the US branch. They said the operations teams also do a lot of trivial tasks, contrary to public opinion, and also mentioned the annual salary would be much lower. But she claims that was just a trap to filter out fools who only care about titles. And since she's a veteran, that kind of method doesn't work on her. Kim thinks she's definitely not all there mentally, but her specs are truly impressive. A former International Association hunter, high-level berserker class. As a hunter, her specs are nothing to scoff at. The problem is those specs have nothing to do with the cleanup team. Kim thinks this person is no different from the others, and with speeds like hers, her self-esteem must be far higher than the average. On top of that, she doesn't even know exactly what a cleanup team does. It's a shame to waste such talent, but she doesn't fit into the cleanup team, and he thinks he'll have to reject her. However, he remembers she's a former international hunter, and asks if she has a brother named Han Sang. Hyuk Yubin is shocked to hear that question, and tells Kim he absolutely can't tell her brother that she came to this interview. With that, the protagonist gets the confirmation he needed. He thinks that if her brother is in the cleanup team, at least she won't look down on them, since her only precious family member belongs to that kind of team. Then suddenly Han shows up and says, he told you Ben not to go to the interview, and asks how she wants to work and clean up when she can't even tidy up her own house. The two start fighting right in front of the protagonist, and don't care at all, which makes Kim realize his judgment about their relationship was totally wrong. Sometime later at the association building, the day arrives when the candidates will be presented to the rest of the company. The head of the HR team and director Min Cheol are present, and with them the protagonist. Kim thinks that normally this isn't a place where he'd be allowed to sit. Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye-bye.